Imam al-Haramain and said, "It cannot be said of the Creator that he is distinct from the world, nor connected to it, nor inside it, nor outside it." This is the meaning of what the philosophers say, that he is neither inside the world nor outside it, based on the existence of non-spatial essences. The theologians denied this because it would entail equating them with the Creator in the most essential attributes, which is elaborated upon in the science of theology. As for the other meaning of distinction, it is divergence and opposition, and it is said, "The Creator is distinct from his creatures in his essence, identity, existence, and attributes." This is opposed to unity, mingling, and mixing. This distinction is the doctrine of all the people of truth, including the majority of the predecessors, scholars of the Sharia, theologians, and ancient mystics of the message, and those who follow their path. A group of later mystics who have turned experiential perceptions into theoretical knowledge claim that the Creator, the Exalted, is united with his creatures in his identity, existence, and attributes. They may even claim that this is the doctrine of the philosophers before Aristotle, such as Plato and Socrates. And this is what the theologians are certain of when they report it in the science of theology from the mystics, and attempt to refute it because it implies two essences, one of which negates the other, or it is included as a part. For that is a clear divergence, and they do not say that. This unity is the indwelling that the Christians claim regarding Christ, peace be upon him, and it is stranger because it is an ancient indwelling in a created being or its union with him. It is also the same as what the Imami Shiites say regarding the Imams. The explanation of this unity in their speech is through two paths. The first is that the essence of the ancient is present in the created beings, both perceived and conceived, united with them in the imaginations, and they are all manifestations of him, and he is the one who sustains them, meaning that without him, they would be non-existent, and this is the view of the proponents of indwelling. The second path is that of the proponents of absolute unity, as if they sensed from the explanation of the proponents of indwelling a divergence that contradicts the concept of unity. So they denied it between the ancient and the created beings in essence, existence, and attributes. They misled themselves regarding the divergence of the perceived manifestations through the senses and intellect, claiming that this is from human perceptions, and they are illusions. They do not mean the illusion that is the counterpart of knowledge, art, and doubt. Rather, they mean that all of it is non-existent in reality, and existence in the human perceiver only. There is no existence in reality, except for the ancient, neither in the apparent nor in the hidden, as we will clarify later, according to possibility. Relying on understanding this through reasoning and inference, as in human perceptions, is not beneficial, for that is only derived from royal perceptions, and it is only attained by the prophets through instinct, and by the saints through guidance. The intention of those who seek to attain it through scientific means is misguidance. Some authors may have intended to achieve this in unveiling existences and arranging their realities according to the path of manifestations, leading to the most obscure. Some authors may have intended to clarify their doctrine in unveiling existence and arranging its realities, leading to the most obscure in relation to the people of reasoning and terminologies and sciences, as did Al-Farghani, the commentator on the poem of Ibn al-Farid, in the introduction he wrote at the beginning of that commentary, where he mentioned the emergence of existence from the agent and its arrangement, stating that all existence emanates from the attribute of oneness, which is the manifestation of unity, and both emanate from the noble essence, which is the essence of unity, nothing else. They call this emergence the manifestation. The first rank of manifestations, according to them, is the manifestation of the essence upon itself, which includes perfection by bestowing existence and appearing, as he said in the hadith that they transmit, "I was a hidden treasure, and I loved to be known, so I created creation to know me." This perfection in existence descends into existence and details the realities, and it is for them the world of meanings, the perfect presence, and the Muhammadan reality, which contains the realities of attributes, the tablet, the pen, and the realities of all the prophets and messengers, and the perfect among the people of the Muhammadan community. All of this is a detailed explanation of the Muhammadan reality. From these realities, other realities emerge in the divine presence, which is the rank of exemplification. Then from it the throne, then the footstool, then the celestial spheres, then the world of elements, then the world of composition. This is in the world of contraction. When it manifests, it is in the world of expansion. This doctrine is called the doctrine of the people of manifestation and presence, and it is a discourse that the people of reasoning cannot attain due to its obscurity and closure, and the distance between the words of the one who witnesses and experiences and the one who relies on evidence. It may even be denied by the apparent Sharia. This arrangement, and likewise, others have gone to the opinion of absolute unity, which is a stranger view in its understanding and ramifications. They claim that existence has powers in its details, through which the realities of existences and their forms and materials were established. The elements only exist because of the powers within them, and likewise, their material has a power through which its existence is realized. Then, the compounds within them contain the power that was responsible for the composition, such as the mineral power within the elements, with its matter, and the increase of the mineral power. Then the animal power contains the mineral power and its increase within itself, and likewise, the human power with the animal power. Then the celestial sphere contains the human power and its increase. Likewise, the spiritual essences and the encompassing power of all, without detail, is the divine power that has spread throughout all existences, both general and specific, encompassing them from every aspect, neither in terms of appearance, nor in terms of concealment, nor in terms of form, nor in terms of matter. All is one, and it is the same divine essence, which is in reality one and simple, and the consideration is what differentiates it, like humanity with animality. Do you not see that it is included within it and exists by being? Sometimes they represent it as the genus with the species, in every existent as we have mentioned, and sometimes as the whole, with the part in the manner of exemplification. In all of this, they flee from composition and multiplicity in every way, and it is only due to illusion and imagination. What appears from the words of Ibn Dihkan in explaining this doctrine is that the essence of what they say about unity resembles what the philosophers say about colors, that their existence is conditional upon light. If light is absent, colors do not exist at all. Likewise, according to them, all perceived existences are conditional upon the existence of the sensory perceiver, and even the rational and imagined existences are also conditional upon the existence of the rational perceiver. Thus, all detailed existence is conditional upon the existence of the human perceiver. If we were to assume the total absence of the human perceiver, there would be no detailed existence. Rather, it is a simple one. Heat, cold, hardness, softness, earth, water, fire, sky, and stars only exist due to the existence of the perceiving senses for what is made in the perceiver of the detail that is not in the existent, and it is only in the perceptions. If the detailed perceptions are lost, there is no detail. It is only one perception, which is I, nothing else. They consider this to be like the state of the sleeper. When he sleeps and loses the outer sense, he loses every perceived thing in that state, except for what his imagination separates for him. They say, thus, the awake person only considers all those perceptions in detail by the type of his human perception. If he were to lose his perception, he would lose the detail. This is the meaning of their claim, which is misleading, not the illusion that is among the human perceptions. This is a summary of their view as understood from the words of Ibn Dihkan, and it is in the utmost fallacy, for we are certain of the existence of the country from which we are travelling and to which we are going, with certainty, even in its absence from our eyes, and of the existence of the sky, the canopy, the stars, and all other things that are absent from us. A person is certain of this, and no one can deny it in certainty, even though the verified among the later mystics say that the seeker, upon unveiling, may experience the illusion of this unity, and they call that the station of gathering. Then he ascends from it to the distinction between existences, and they express that as the station of differentiation, which is the station of the true knower. The seeker must, according to them, face the obstacle of gathering, which is a difficult obstacle because the seeker fears that he may remain at it and lose his transaction. The ranks of the people of this path have become clear, and all of these later mystics who speak about unveiling and what lies beyond perception have delved deeply into that, leading many of them to the belief in indwelling and unity as we have indicated, and they filled the pages with it, like al-Harawi in his book The Stations, and others. They followed Ibn Arabi, Ibn Sab'in, and their student Ibn al-Afif, and Ibn al-Farid, and al-Najm al-Israeli in their poems. Their predecessors were mingling with the later Ismailis among the Shiites, who also believed in indwelling and the divinity of the Imams, a doctrine that was not known to their first ones. Each group absorbed the beliefs of the other, and their words became mixed, and their doctrines became similar. The discourse of the mystics has emerged regarding the pole, meaning the head of the knowers. They claim that no one can equal him in his station of knowledge until God takes him. Then his station is inherited by another from the people of Gnosis. Ibn Sina alluded to this in his book The Signs, in the Excesses of Sufism, saying, "Exalted is the majesty of the truth, that it should be a law for every newcomer, or be revealed to him, except one after another." This is a statement that does not have a rational proof or a legal evidence. It is merely a type of rhetoric, and it is precisely what the Shiites say and adhere to. They then spoke of the arrangement of the existence of the substitutes after this pole, as the Shiites do regarding the leaders. Even when they attributed the wearing of the Sufi cloak to establish it as a foundation for their path and sect, they raised it to Ali, may God be pleased with him, which is also from this meaning. Otherwise Ali, may God be pleased with him, was not distinguished among the companions by his seclusion or a specific way in clothing or state. Rather, Abu Bakr and Umar, may God be pleased with them, were the most ascetic people after the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, and the most devoted. None of them was distinguished in religion by anything that was reported about him in particular. Rather, all the companions were equal in religion, asceticism, and struggle, as their biographies and reports testify. Yes, the Shiites imagine that what they attribute to Ali, may God be pleased with him, is a distinction in virtues over others among the companions, going along with their known beliefs of Shiism. What appears is that the mystics in Iraq, when the Ismailis of the Shiites appeared, and their discourse on leadership and what pertains to it became known, they borrowed from that the balance between the apparent and the hidden, and made leadership for the governance of the successors in submission to the Sharia, and they isolated it so that no differences would arise, as established in the Sharia. They then made the pole for teaching knowledge of God, because he is the head of the knowers, and they isolated him in that, likening him to the Imam in the apparent, and that he should be on par with him in the hidden, and they called him a pole for the orbit of knowledge around him, and made the substitutes like the leaders, exaggerating in the comparison. Reflect on that. This is evidenced by the words of these mystics regarding the Fatimid, and what they filled their books with regarding it, which has no mention in the words of the predecessors of the mystics, either in denial or affirmation, but rather it is taken from the words of the Shiites and the Rafida and their doctrines in their books. And God guides to the truth. Appendix. I have seen fit to bring here a section from the words of our Sheikh, the Knower, the great saint of Andalusia, Abu Mahdi Isa ibn al-Zayyat, who often encountered the verses of al-Harawi that appeared in his book, The Stations, which seem to imply the claim of absolute unity, or nearly state it, and in his words, "The one who unifies the one does not unify, for whoever unifies him is a denier of the unity of the one who speaks of his attributes. The one who attributes to him is not one." He said, "May God have mercy on him," in a manner of excusing him. People have been perplexed by the use of the term stagnation on anyone who unifies the one, and the term heresy on anyone who attributes to him and describes him. They have found these verses strange and have accused their speaker of disbelief and belittled him. We say, according to the view of this group, that the meaning of unity for them is the negation of the essence of creation by the affirmation of the essence of eternity, and that all existence is one reality, one essence. Abu Sa'id al-Jazar, one of the great ones, said, "The truth is the essence of what appears and the essence of what is hidden." They see that the occurrence of multiplicity in that reality is the existence of duality. They are, in terms of the presence of the senses, like images of delusion and deception. Everything other than the essence of eternity, if it is followed, is non-existence. This is the meaning of Allah was, and there was nothing with him. and he is now as he was in their view. The meaning of the Great One who was confirmed by the messenger of God, peace be upon him, in his saying, "Everything, except Allah, is false." They said, "Whoever unifies and attributes has spoken of a created being. His essence is the creator, and the unity of the created is his action, existing and capable, and he is the worshipped." The meaning of unity is the negation of the essence of creation, and the essence of creation is now established but multiple, and unity is denied, and the claim is false, like someone saying to another, while they are both in one house, "There is no one in the house but you," and the other responds in his heart, "This is only true if you cease to exist." Some of the verified have said regarding their statement, "Allah created time," that these words contradict their principles because the creation of time precedes time, and it is an action that must occur in time. This is only due to the narrowness of expression regarding the realities and the inadequacy of languages to convey the truth in them and through them. If it is established that the one who unifies is the unifier, and the absence of anything else is total, then true unity is established. This is the meaning of their saying, "No one knows Allah except Allah," and there is no harm for one who unifies the truth while the forms and effects remain, for it is merely a matter of, "The good deeds of the righteous are the sins of the close ones." For that is the necessary limitation and servitude and intercession. Whoever ascends to the station of gathering is in his right a deficiency, with his knowledge of his rank, and that it is a disguise that servitude entails, and he is veiled from the filth of his creation, the essence of gathering. The most profound of the categories in this claim are those who assert absolute unity. The essence of knowledge, in every regard, is to reach the One, and this statement has emerged from the poet as a means of incitement and alertness to a higher station where intercession is lifted, and absolute unity is attained in essence, not in speech. The phrase, "Whoever submits finds rest, and whoever is challenged by the truth finds comfort in his saying, 'I was his hearing and sight.'" When you understand the meanings, there is no dispute in the words. What all of this conveys is the realization of a matter beyond this level, where there is no speech or report about it. This amount of indication is sufficient, and delving into such matters is a veil. This is what has led to the known articles of faith. This is the speech of Sheikh Abu Mahdi al-Zayyat, and I have quoted it from the book of Minister Abu al-Khatib, which he authored on love, and he named it The Definition of Noble Love. I have heard it from our Sheikh Abu Mahdi several times, but I found the written form more comprehensive due to the length of my time with it. And God is the grantor of success. Then many jurists and those who issue fatwas have taken it upon themselves to refute these later ones regarding these articles and similar matters, and they have included in their condemnation everything that has occurred to them in the path. The truth is that their words with them have details, for their discourse is in 4 areas. The first is the discussion of struggles and what arises from tastes and experiences, and holding oneself accountable for actions to attain those tastes that become a station and from which one ascends to another, as we have said. The second is the discussion of unveiling and the perceived truth from the unseen world, such as the divine attributes, the throne, the footstool, the angels, revelation, prophethood, the spirit, and the realities of every existent, whether hidden or witnessed, and the composition of colors in their emergence from their existence and their formation, as mentioned. The third is the actions in the worlds and existences through various miracles. The fourth is the seemingly misleading words that have been expressed by many of the leaders of the people, which they refer to in their terminology as excesses, whose apparent meanings are perplexing, leading to denial, acceptance, or interpretation. As for the discourse on struggles and stations and what arises from tastes and experiences in their results, and holding oneself accountable for shortcomings in their causes, this is a matter that no one can refute, and their tastes in it are valid, and realizing them is the essence of happiness. As for the discourse on the miracles of the people and their reports of the unseen and their actions in existences, this is a valid matter that is not denied. Even if some scholars have leaned towards denying it, That is not the truth. What Professor Abu Ishaq al-Isfarayini, one of the leaders of the Ash'ari school, has argued against it due to its confusion with miracles, the verified among the people of the Sunnah have distinguished between them through challenge, which is the claim of the occurrence of miracles in accordance with what has been brought. They said, then the occurrence of it in accordance with the claim of the liar is not possible, for the indication of the miracle on truthfulness is rational, for its very nature is to affirm. If it occurred with the liar, its nature would change, which is impossible. This is in addition to the fact that existence bears witness to the occurrence of many of these miracles, and denying them is a type of obstinacy. Many of these occurred for the companions and the great predecessors, and it is well known and famous. As for the discourse on unveiling and providing the truths of the upper realms and arranging the emergence of existences, much of their discourse in this regard is a type of ambiguity, because it is experiential for them, and the absence of experience places them at a distance from their tastes in it. The languages do not provide evidence for their intended meanings because they were only established for mutual understanding, and most of it pertains to the perceived. Therefore, we should not engage with their words in that regard, and leave it among what we have left of the ambiguous, and whoever God has granted understanding of some of these words in accordance with the apparent Sharia, let him be honored with happiness. As for the seemingly misleading words that they express as excesses, and for which they are held accountable by the people of the Sharia, know that fairness regarding the people is that they are in a state of absence from the senses and the inspirations that possess them, until they speak of them in ways they do not intend. The one in a state of absence is not addressed, and the compelled is excused. Whoever among them knows his virtue and follows it, carries the good intention behind this and similar matters, and that expressing experiences is difficult due to the lack of established terms for it, as occurred with Abu Yazid al-Bistami and others like him. Whoever does not know his virtue and is not famous is held accountable for what has been issued from him, if it is not clear to us what compels us to interpret his words. As for one who speaks similarly, while present in his senses, and does not possess the state, he is also held accountable. For this reason, the jurists and the great mystics issued a fatwa to execute al-Hallaj, because he spoke in the presence while he was in control of his state. And God knows best. The predecessors of the mystics from the people of the message, whom we have referred to before, did not have a desire for unveiling the veil or this type of perception. Rather, their concern was following and emulating as much as they could. Whoever experienced something of that turned away from it and did not pay attention to it, but rather fled from it, seeing it as an obstacle and a trial, and as a perception from the perceptions of the soul, created and newly formed, and that existences are not confined to human perceptions. The knowledge of God is broader, and his creation is greater, and his Sharia in guidance is more powerful, so they do not speak of anything they perceive. Rather, they prohibited delving into that, and forbade those who have unveiled the veil from delving into it and remaining at it. But they adhere to their path as they were in the realm of senses before the unveiling, in following and emulating, and they command their companions to adhere to it. This is how the state of the seeker should be, and God is the grantor of success. Chapter 18. On the science of dream interpretation. This science is one of the religious sciences, and it is a recent development in the faith when knowledge became crafts and people wrote about it. As for visions and their interpretation, they existed among the predecessors just as they do among the successors. There may have been kings and nations before, but it did not reach us as we relied on the words of interpreters from the people of Islam. However, visions exist among humans in general and must be interpreted. Indeed, Joseph the prophet, peace be upon him, interpreted visions as mentioned in the Quran. It is also firmly established from authentic sources about the prophet, peace be upon him, and about Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with him, that visions are a means of accessing the unseen. The prophet, peace be upon him, said, "A good vision is one part of 46 parts of prophecy." He also said, "Nothing remains of the glad tidings except a good vision that a righteous man sees, or it is seen for him." The first thing that the prophet, peace be upon him, began with from revelation was a vision, and he would not see a vision except that it came like the break of dawn. When the prophet, peace be upon him, finished the dawn prayer, He would ask his companions, "Did any one of you see a vision last night?" He would ask them about it to rejoice in what occurred that indicated the emergence and glorification of the religion. As for the reason why visions are a means of accessing the unseen, it is that the heart's spirit, which is the subtle vapor emanating from the cavity of the fleshy heart, spreads through the arteries and with the blood throughout the body, completing the actions and sensations of the animal faculties. When the spirit is hindered by excessive engagement in sensory perception through the five senses and the activity of the apparent faculties, and when the surface of the body is affected by the cold of the night, the spirit retracts from all parts of the body to its heart center, thus resting to resume its function, causing all the apparent senses to become inactive, which is the meaning of sleep, as mentioned at the beginning of the book. Then, this heart spirit serves as a mount for the rational spirit of man, and the rational spirit perceives all that exists in the realm of command by its essence, as its reality and essence are identical to perception. What prevents it from connecting to the unseen perceptions is the veil of being preoccupied with the body and its faculties and surroundings. If it were to be free from this veil and stripped of it, it would return to its essence, which is identical to perception, and it would comprehend every perceivable thing. If it were to be stripped of some distractions, its preoccupations would lessen, and it would inevitably perceive a glimpse of its world according to how much it has been stripped. And in this state, all the distractions of the apparent senses would have lessened, which are the greatest distractions, thus preparing it to accept what is suitable from its world. When it perceives what it can from its worlds, it returns with it to its body. For as long as it is in its body, it cannot act except through bodily perceptions. The bodily perceptions of knowledge are only cerebral, and the one that acts from them is the imagination. It extracts from the perceived images imaginative forms, and then sends them to the memory to retain them until the time of need for them during contemplation and reasoning. Likewise, the soul abstracts from them other mental and rational images, thus elevating the abstraction from the perceived to the conceptual, with imagination being the intermediary between them. Therefore, when the soul perceives from its world what it can, it casts it to the imagination, which shapes it into an appropriate form and sends it to the common sense. So the sleeper sees it as if it were perceived, and thus the perception descends from the rational spirit to the sensory. Imagination is also an intermediary. This is the reality of visions. From this explanation, the difference between a good vision and false dreams becomes clear, as they are all images in the imagination during sleep. However, if those images are derived from the rational spirit's perception, it is a vision. If they are taken from the images stored in the memory that the imagination had deposited there since wakefulness, they are false dreams. Know that true visions have signs that indicate their truthfulness and testify to their validity, so the dreamer feels the glad tidings from God of what has been cast into his sleep. Among them is the quick awakening of the dreamer when he perceives the vision, as if he is hastening to return to sensory awareness in wakefulness, even if he is deeply asleep, for little of what has been cast upon him from that perception remains, and he escapes from that state to the state of sensation, where the soul remains immersed in the body and its afflictions. Among them is the permanence of that perception and its continuity, with the imprint of that vision and its details retained in his memory, so he does not imagine it as forgetfulness or negligence. He does not need to bring it to mind through thought and reminder, but it remains vividly in his mind when he awakens. Nothing from it escapes him, because the mental perception is not temporal and does not follow a sequence, but is perceived all at once in a single moment. False dreams are temporal because they are in the cerebral faculties, extracted by the imagination from the memory to the common sense, as we have said. All bodily actions are temporal, thus they follow a sequence in perception, with prior and subsequent events. Forgetfulness may occur in the cerebral faculties. The same is not true for the perceptions of the rational soul, as they are not temporal and have no sequence. What is imprinted in them from perceptions is imprinted all at once, in less than the blink of an eye. A vision may remain after awakening, present in memory for days of life, not straying from thought at all if the initial perception is strong. If one only remembers the vision after awakening from sleep by exerting thought and directing attention to it, forgetting many of its details until he recalls them, then it is not a true vision, but rather one of false dreams. These signs are among the characteristics of revelation. God, the Exalted, said to his prophet, "Peace be upon him. Do not move your tongue to hasten it. Indeed, upon us is its collection and recitation. So when we have recited it, then follow its recitation. Then upon us is its clarification." And visions have a relation to prophecy and revelation, as is established in authentic sources. The prophet, peace be upon him, said, "A vision is one part of 46 parts of prophecy, so its characteristics also relate to the characteristics of prophecy. Thus, do not be surprised by that. This is the truth, and God is the creator of what he wills." As for the meaning of interpretation, know that when the rational spirit perceives a perceivable thing and casts it to the imagination, it shapes it into forms suitable for that meaning somewhat, as it perceives the meaning of the supreme ruler and imagines it in the form of the sea, or perceives enmity and imagines it in the form of a snake. When he awakens and knows nothing of his affair except that he saw the sea or the snake, the interpreter looks with the power of analogy after being certain that the sea is a tangible image and that the perceivable is beyond it, and he is guided by other clues that assist him in identifying the perceivable, saying, for example, "It is the ruler because the sea is a great creation suitable to be likened to the ruler, and likewise, the snake is suitable to be likened to the enemy due to its great harm. And similarly, vessels are likened to women because they are containers," and similar examples. Among the seen are those that are explicit and do not require interpretation due to their clarity and obviousness, or due to the close resemblance between the perceivable and its likeness. Thus, it is mentioned in authentic sources that there are 3 types of visions: a vision from God, a vision from an angel, and a vision from a devil. The vision that is from God is the explicit one that does not require interpretation, and the one from the angel is the truthful vision that requires interpretation, while the vision from the devil is the false dreams. Know that when the imagination receives from the spirit its perceivable, it shapes it into the usual molds for the senses, and what the senses have never perceived from the molds, it cannot shape anything in it. Thus, it is impossible for a blind person to have the ruler imagined as the sea, or the enemy as a snake, or women as vessels, because he has never perceived any of these. The imagination can only shape for him similar things from the kind of perceptions he has, which are sounds and scents. The interpreter should be cautious of such matters, for sometimes the interpretation may become confused, and its principles may become corrupted. Then, the science of interpretation is a science based on general laws upon which the interpreter builds the interpretation of what is narrated to him. Its interpretation, as they say, is, the sea indicates the ruler, and in another context they say, the sea indicates anger, and in another context they say, the sea indicates worry and a grave matter. Similarly, they say, the snake indicates the enemy, and in another context they say, it is a keeper of secrets, and in another context they say, it indicates life, and similar interpretations. The interpreter retains these general laws and interprets in each case according to the clues that indicate from these laws what is most appropriate for the vision. Those clues come from the state of wakefulness, from sleep, and from what arises in the interpreter's mind due to the specific qualities created in him, for each is facilitated for what it was created for. This science has been transmitted among the predecessors. Muhammad ibn Sirin was one of the most famous scholars in it, and he wrote about its laws, which people have transmitted to this day. Al-Karmani authored works on it after him. Then, later scholars wrote extensively on it. The works circulated among the people of the Maghreb today include those of Ibn Abi Talib al-Qayrawani, a scholar from Qayrawan, such as Al-Mumta and others, and the book Al-Ishara by Al-Salimi is one of the most beneficial books in this regard. Likewise, the book Al-Murkaba al-Ulya by Ibn Rashid from our scholars in Tunisia. It is a luminous science that illuminates prophecy due to the connection between them and because it was among the means of revelation, as established in authentic sources, and God is all-knowing of the unseen. Chapter 19. On intellectual sciences and their types. As for the intellectual sciences that are natural to humans in terms of being thinkers, they are not specific to any particular religion, but rather pertain to the perspective of all religious communities. and they are equal in their understanding and discussions. These sciences have existed in the human species since the dawn of creation. These sciences are called the sciences of philosophy and wisdom, and they encompass 4 branches. The first is the science of logic, which is a discipline that protects the mind from error in grasping unknown matters from known occurrences, and its benefit is to distinguish between error and truth. This is what the observer seeks in existing things and their attributes to arrive at the truth of beings, both in negation and affirmation, to the utmost of his thought. Then, the inquiry may be either into the tangible things of elemental bodies and those composed of minerals, plants, animals, celestial bodies, and natural movements, and the soul that gives rise to movements, among other things. This field is called natural science, which is the second of them. Alternatively, the inquiry may be into matters beyond nature, concerning spiritual entities, which is called divine science, and this is the third. The fourth science concerns quantities and includes 4 branches known as the teachings. The first of these is geometry, which is the study of quantities in general, whether they are discrete in terms of being counted or continuous, and these can be one-dimensional, line, two-dimensional, surface, or three-dimensional, solid. It examines these quantities and what pertains to them either in terms of their essence or in terms of the relationship between them. The second is arithmetic, which is the knowledge of what pertains to discrete quantities, which is numbers, and it involves their properties and subsequent attributes. The third is music, which is the knowledge of the ratios of sounds and melodies in relation to one another and their quantification, with its fruit being the understanding of musical tunes. The fourth is astronomy, which is the determination of the shapes of celestial bodies and the classification of their positions and multiplicity for each planet, both moving and fixed, and understanding this through the observable celestial movements of each one, including their return, straightness, approach, and retreat. These are the foundations of philosophical sciences, which are 7. Logic, which is the foremost, followed by the teachings. Arithmetic first, then geometry, then astronomy, then music, then natural sciences, then divine sciences, and each of these has branches that branch out from it. Among the branches of natural sciences is medicine, and among the branches of arithmetic is the science of calculation, inheritance, and transactions. Among the branches of astronomy are the tables, which are laws for calculating the movements of planets and adjusting them to determine their positions when intended. And among its branches is the study of stars according to astrological rules, and we will discuss them one by one until the end. Know that the 2 great nations that we know of in the generations who were concerned with these sciences before Islam were Persia and Rome, where the markets of knowledge were thriving, as we have learned, due to the abundance of civilization and state power before and during the time of Islam. These sciences had vast oceans in their horizons and cities. The Chaldeans and their predecessors from the Syrians and contemporaries from the Copts had an interest in magic and astrology, and what follows from it in terms of talismans, and this was taken from them by the nations of Persia and Greece, and the Copts specialized in it, and its oceans surged within them, as mentioned in the story of Harut and Marut, and the matter of sorcerers, and what scholars have transmitted about the wilderness in Upper Egypt. Then the nations followed suit in prohibiting and forbidding it, so its sciences faded away, as if they had never existed, except for remnants passed down by those who claimed these crafts. And God knows the truth of it, although the swords of the law were raised against it, preventing its practice. As for the Persians, the matter of these intellectual sciences was significant among them, and their scope was vast due to the greatness of their state and the continuity of their kingship. It can be said that these sciences only reached Greece from them when Alexander killed Darius and conquered the kingdom of the Kenites, seizing their books and knowledge. However, when the Muslims opened the land of Persia and obtained from their books and scientific writings what cannot be counted, and when the land of Persia was opened, they found many books that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas had written to Umar ibn al-Khattab, seeking permission regarding them and their transfer to the Muslims. Umar wrote to him to throw them into the water. If what is in them is guidance, then God has guided us with better than it, and if it is misguidance, then God has sufficed us. So they were thrown into the water or the fire, and the knowledge of the Persians was lost to us. As for the Romans, their state was initially with the Greeks, and there was a wide field for these sciences among them, carried by prominent figures such as the Pillars of Wisdom and others. The peripatetics among them specialized in a good method of teaching. They would read in a shaded portico from the sun and cold, as they claimed. Their chain of teaching is said to have continued from Luqman the Wise to his student Hippocrates, then to his student Plato, then to his student Aristotle, then to his student Alexander of Aphrodisias, and Themistian and others. Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander, their king, who defeated the Persians and seized the kingship from their hands. He was the most established in these sciences and the most renowned in them. He was called the first teacher, and his fame spread throughout the world. When the Greek era came to an end and the emperors took over, adopting Christianity, they abandoned those sciences as their religions and laws required. They remained in their books and records, preserved in their treasures, and then they conquered the Levant, and these sciences remained with them. Then God brought forth Islam, and its people had an unparalleled prominence, and they seized the Roman kingdom in what they took from the nations. Their beginnings were marked by simplicity and ignorance of crafts, until they became established in power and state, and took on civilization in a way that was not afforded to other nations, and they excelled in crafts and sciences. They became eager to explore these philosophical sciences, due to what they heard from bishops and priests about some of their mentions and what human thoughts aspire to in them. Abu Ja'far al-Mansur wrote to the king of the Romans, asking him to send him translated books of the teachings, and he sent him the book of Euclid and some books of natural sciences. The Muslims read them and became eager to obtain what remained of them. Then al-Mamun came after that, and he had a desire for knowledge, as he claimed, so he became eager for these sciences and sent messengers to the kings of the Romans to extract the sciences of the Greeks and transcribe them in Arabic script, sending translators for that, and he gathered much from it. The scholars of Islam devoted themselves to it and excelled in its arts, reaching the pinnacle of their understanding in it. They disagreed with many of the first teacher's opinions and specialized in refuting and accepting them as his fame was established. They recorded this in books and surpassed those who preceded them in these sciences. Among their prominent figures in the faith were Abu Nasr al-Farabi and Abu Ali ibn Sina in the east, and the judge Abu Walid ibn Rushd and the minister Abu Bakr ibn al-Sa'iq in Andalusia, among others who reached the pinnacle in these sciences. These were distinguished by fame and mention, and many limited themselves to claiming the teachings and what is added to them from the sciences of astrology, magic, and talismans. The fame in this claimed knowledge was attributed to Jabir ibn Hayyan from the east and Muslima ibn Ahmad al-Majriti from Andalusia and his student. And there entered into the faith from these sciences and their people a deviation that captivated many people as they inclined towards it and imitated its opinions, and the blame lies with those who committed it. If God had willed, they would not have done it. Then, when the winds of civilization calmed in the Maghreb and Andalusia, and the sciences diminished with its decline, that faded away from them, except for a little of its remnants, which you find among scattered people, and under the guidance of scholars of the Sunnah. We are informed that the goods of these sciences have remained abundant among the people of the East, especially in the land of the Persians and beyond the river, and that they are on a sea of intellectual sciences due to the abundance of their civilization and the establishment of their culture. I have encountered in Egypt multiple writings in the rational sciences by a man from the great ones of Herat, from the land of Khorasan, known as Sa'ad al-Din al-Taftazani, in the science of theology, the principles of jurisprudence, and rhetoric, which testify that he has a deep mastery in these sciences. Among them is what indicates that he has insight into philosophical sciences and a high standing in all rational arts, and God supports with his victory whom he wills. Likewise, we have learned that these philosophical sciences, in the lands of the Franks, from the land of Rome and its northern borders, are thriving, and their traditions are renewed, and their teaching circles are numerous, and their records are abundant and available, and their students are many, and God knows what is there, and he creates what he wills and chooses. Chapter 20. On numerical sciences. The first is arithmetic, which is the knowledge of the properties of numbers in terms of composition, either in succession or by doubling. For example, if the numbers are consecutive and differ by 1, then the sum of both ends is equal to the sum of every two numbers after them from both ends, differing by 1. Similarly, the double of the mean, if the count of those numbers is odd, is like the odd numbers in succession and the even numbers in succession. For instance, if the numbers are in a consistent ratio, the first is half of the second is half of the third, and so on. Or the first is a third of the second is a third of the third, and so forth. If both ends are multiplied by each other, it is like multiplying every two numbers after them from both ends by 1. The square of the mean, if the count is odd, is like the consecutive even numbers starting from 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on. The numerical properties that arise in the arrangement of triangular numbers, squares, pentagons, and hexagons, when arranged consecutively in their lines, can be summed from 1 to the last number to form a triangle. The triangles continue in a line under the sides, then add a third of the side of the previous triangle to each triangle to form squares. Each square adds the triangle of the previous side to form pentagons, and so on. The shapes continue in succession according to the sides, creating a table with length and width. In its width, the numbers are arranged in succession, then the triangles in succession, then the squares, then the pentagons, and so forth. In its length, every number and its shapes, regardless of how many, create strange properties in their summation and division among each other in length and width, which have settled and been established in their books with their issues. Similarly, what happens to even and odd numbers, pairs of even and odd numbers, as each has its own specific properties contained in this art and not found elsewhere. This art is the first part of the teachings and the most established, and it is included in the proofs of arithmetic. The ancient and modern philosophers have written about it, and most of them include it in the teachings without dedicating separate works to it. Ibn Sina did this in his books Al-Shifa and Al-Najat, among others from the ancients. As for the moderns, it is neglected among them as it is not widely circulated, and its benefit lies in proofs, not in arithmetic, so they have abandoned it for that reason after they extracted its essence in arithmetic proofs, as Ibn al-Banna did in his book Raf al-Hijab and others, and God, the Almighty, knows best. Among the branches of the science of numbers is the art of arithmetic, which is a scientific craft in the calculation of numbers through addition and subtraction. Addition occurs in numbers through individuals, which is summation, and by doubling, multiplying a number by the units of another number, which is multiplication. Subtraction also occurs in numbers, either by individuals, such as removing a number from another and taking the remaining, which is subtraction, or by dividing a number into equal parts, which is division. This addition and subtraction can occur in whole numbers or fractions. The meaning of a fraction is the ratio of one number to another, and that ratio is called a fraction. Similarly, addition and subtraction can occur in roots, which means a number that is multiplied by itself to yield a square number. These roots also involve addition and subtraction, and this craft is newly needed for calculations in transactions, and people have written extensively about it and circulated it in cities for teaching children. The best way to teach them is to start with it, because it contains clear knowledge and organized proofs, which generally leads to a bright mind trained on the right path. It has been said that whoever begins their education in arithmetic will be inclined towards truthfulness due to the accuracy of the foundations in arithmetic and the self-examination it entails, leading to a character of truthfulness and a consistent approach. Among the best comprehensive works in this field in the present time in the Maghreb is the book Al-Hisar al-Sagir. Ibn al-Banna al-Marakushi has a useful summary of the laws of its operations, and he explained it in a book he called Raf al-Hijab, which is intricate for beginners due to its solid proofs. It is a book of great value, and we have seen the elders revering it, and it is indeed deserving of that. The author, may God have mercy on him, has compared it to the book Fiqh al-Hizab by Ibn Mun'im and Al-Kamil by Al-Ahdab, summarizing its proofs and others from the terminology of letters into apparent meaningful reasons, which is the secret of indicating with letters and its essence. All of it is intricate, and the intricacy arises from the proofs by clarifying the sciences of the teachings, because all its issues and operations are clear. If one intends to explain it, it is merely to provide the reasons for those operations. In that, there is a difficulty in understanding that is not found in the operations of the issues, so contemplate that. and God guides whom he wills by his light, and he is the strong, the mighty. Among its branches are algebra and correspondence, which is a craft through which the unknown number is extracted from the known assumed number if there is a ratio between them that necessitates that. They have agreed to assign ranks to the unknowns through doubling by multiplication. The first is the number, because it determines the required unknown by extracting it from the ratio of the unknown to it. The second is the thing, because every unknown is, in terms of its ambiguity, a thing, and it is also a root of what is required from its doubling in the second rank. The third is wealth, which is an ambiguous matter, and what follows is based on the ratio of the base in the multiplied numbers. Then the assumed work in the issue occurs, leading to an equation between different or more of these types, where they compare them with each other and correct any fractions until it becomes whole. They reduce the ranks to the lowest bases if possible, until it reaches the three that are the basis of algebra for them, which are the number, the thing, and wealth. If the equation is between 1 and 1, it becomes determined, and wealth and the root lose their ambiguity by equating with the number and become determined. Wealth, even if it equals the roots, becomes determined by its count. If the equation is between 1 and 2, the geometric work extracts it through the detailed multiplication in 2, which is ambiguous, and that detailed multiplication concerns it. It is not possible to equate between 2 and 2. Most equations among them have ended up with 6 issues because the equation between a number, a root, and a single or compound wealth results in 6. The first to write in this art was Abu Abdullah al-Khwarizmi, followed by Abu Kamil Shuja bin Aslam, and people followed in his footsteps. His book on its 6 issues is among the best books written in it. Many from Al-Andalus have explained it well, and among the best of its explanations is the book by Al-Qurashi. We have reached that some scholars of the teachings from the East have extended the transactions to more than these 6 types, reaching over 20 and extracting operations for all of them, following them with geometric proofs. And God increases in creation what he wills, the Almighty. Among its branches are also the operations, which is the management of arithmetic in urban transactions in sales, areas, zakat, and all that involves numbers in transactions, applying that arithmetic to the unknown and known, fractions and whole numbers, roots, and others. The aim of increasing the issues imposed in it is to gain practice and skill through repeated work until mastery in the craft of arithmetic is established. The practitioners of arithmetic in Al-Andalus have multiple writings in this, among the most famous of which are the transactions of Al-Zahrawi, Ibn al-Samh, and Abu Muslim bin Khaldun, a student of Muslima al-Majriti and their likes. Among its branches are also the shares, which is an arithmetic craft in correcting the shares for those entitled to inherit when there are multiple heirs, and some heirs die, and their shares are divided among their heirs, or the shares increase when they come together and compete for the entire wealth. Or if there is a declaration and denial in the shares from some heirs, then all of this requires work to determine the shares of the inheritance from how many are valid and the shares of the heirs from each lineage, correcting them until the shares of the heirs from the wealth are proportional to their shares from the total shares of the inheritance. This includes a large part of the arithmetic craft, including whole numbers, fractions, and roots, both known and unknown, and is arranged according to the arrangement of the chapters of the legal shares and their issues. Thus, this craft encompasses a part of jurisprudence, which is the rulings of inheritance from shares, excess, declaration, denial, wills, management, and other issues, and a part of arithmetic, which is correcting the shares according to the legal ruling, and it is one of the noblest sciences. Its scholars may cite prophetic traditions that testify to its virtue, such as the shares are a third of knowledge, and that it is the first to be lifted from the sciences, and others. I believe that the apparent meanings of all those traditions are only in the specific shares, as previously mentioned, not in the shares of inheritance, as they are less than a third of knowledge in quantity. As for the specific shares, they are many, and people have written extensively in this art, both ancient and modern, and have compiled it. Among the best writings in it, according to the Maliki school of thought, is the book of Ibn Thabit, and the summary of the judge Abu al-Qasim al-Hufi, and the book of Ibn al-Manmar, al-Jadi, al-Sadi, and others. However, the preference goes to al-Hufi, as his book is superior to all of them. It has been explained by our teacher Abu Abdullah Muhammad bin Sulaiman al-Shati, a prominent scholar in Fes, who clarified and elaborated on it. Imam al-Haramain has also written on it according to the Shafi'i school, which testifies to his extensive knowledge in the sciences and his firm standing, as well as for the Hanafis and Hanbalis. The ranks of people in sciences differ, and God guides whom he wills by his grace and generosity. There is no Lord but him.
Chapter 21.
In engineering sciences. This science is the consideration of quantities, either continuous like lines, surfaces, and bodies, or discrete like numbers, and the accidents that may occur to them. For example, every triangle has angles that sum to 2 right angles, and that 2 parallel lines do not meet at any point, even if extended indefinitely, and that for 2 intersecting lines, the opposite angles are equal, and that for 4 proportional quantities, the product of the first and third is equal to the product of the second and fourth, and similar statements. The translated book for the Greeks in this field is the Book of Euclid, known as the Book of Elements and the Book of Foundations, which is the simplest work written for learners and the first translated from the Greek books in the community during the time of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, and its copies vary according to the translators. Among them are those by Hunayn ibn Ishaq, Thabit ibn Qurra, and Yusuf ibn al-Hajjaj, and it consists of 15 propositions, 4 on surfaces, 1 on proportional quantities, another on the ratios of surfaces to each other, 3 on numbers, the 10th on logical propositions and powers of logical propositions, meaning roots, and 5 on solids. People have summarized it in many ways, as Ibn Sina did in his teachings of healing. He dedicated a part of it to this. Likewise, Ibn al-Salt in his book on brevity and others. Others have explained it in many commentaries, and it is the foundation of geometric sciences in general. Know that geometry benefits its practitioner by illuminating the mind and organizing thought, as all its proofs are clear, orderly, and rarely allow for error due to their arrangement and organization, which distances the mind from mistakes through practice and develops a mind in that direction. It is said that it was written on the door of Plato, "Let no one enter who is not a geometer," and our scholars, may God have mercy on them, used to say that practicing geometry for the mind is like soap for a garment that washes away dirt and cleanses it from stains and filth, and this is due to what we have indicated about its order and organization. Among the branches of this art is geometry, specific to spherical shapes and cones. As for spherical shapes, there are 2 books from the Greek writings by Theodosius and Milos on their surfaces and sections, and the book of Theodosius is preferred in teaching over the book of Milos because many of its proofs depend on it. Both are necessary for anyone who wants to delve into the science of astronomy because its proofs depend on them. Thus, all discussions in astronomy are discussions about celestial spheres and what occurs in them, from sections and circles due to movements, as we will mention, and knowledge of the rules of spherical shapes, their surfaces, and sections is essential. As for cones, it is also a branch of geometry. It is a science that examines what occurs in conical bodies from shapes and sections, and proves what arises from that, with geometric proofs that depend on initial education. Its usefulness appears in practical crafts, whose materials are bodies, such as trade, construction, how to create strange statues and rare structures, and how to imagine lifting weights and transporting structures with hoists and similar means. Some authors have dedicated a book in this field to scientific tricks that include strange crafts and delightful tricks, all of which are astonishing. It may be difficult for understanding due to the complexity of its geometric proofs, and it is available in the hands of people attributed to the Banu Shakir, and God knows best. Among the branches of geometry is surveying, which is an art needed for measuring land, meaning extracting the area of known land in relation to a cubit or an arm or others, and comparing one land to another when measured similarly. This is needed for assessing taxes on farms, fields and orchards, and in dividing walls and lands among partners and heirs, and similar matters. People have many good and numerous topics in this regard, and God is the guide to the truth by his grace and generosity. Debate is one of the branches of geometry, and it is a science that clarifies the causes of error in visual perception by understanding how they occur, based on the fact that visual perception occurs with a conical shape, whose apex is the observer's point, and whose base is the visible area. Errors often occur in seeing nearby objects as large and distant objects as small. Likewise, seeing small shadows underwater and behind transparent objects as large, and seeing a falling raindrop as a straight line and a wave as a circle, and similar instances. This science clarifies the causes and methods of these phenomena through geometric proofs, and it also clarifies the differences in the appearance of the moon due to varying latitudes, which is essential for understanding the sighting of crescents and the occurrence of eclipses, and many similar matters. Many Greeks have authored works in this field, and the most famous among the Muslims who wrote about it is Ibn al-Haytham. Others have also written on it, and it is part of this discipline and its branches. Chapter 22. On the science of astronomy. It is a science that examines the movements of fixed, moving, and perplexing planets. It infers from the nature of those movements the shapes and positions of the celestial spheres that are necessitated by these tangible movements through geometric methods. It also proves that the center of the Earth is different from the center of the Sun's sphere by the existence of the movements of approach and retreat, and it infers from the retrograde and direct motions of the planets the existence of smaller orbits carrying them, moving within their greater orbit. It also demonstrates the existence of the eighth sphere through the movement of the fixed planets, and proves the multiplicity of orbits for a single planet by the number of its inclinations and similar matters. The understanding of the existing movements, their qualities, and types is achieved through observation, as we only learned about the movements of approach and retreat through it. Likewise, the arrangement of the spheres in their layers, as well as retrograde and direct motions, and similar matters. The Greeks paid great attention to observation and created instruments to observe the movement of specific planets. These were called the instrument with rings, and the craft of making it and the proofs of its correspondence with the movement of the sphere were transmitted by people. However, in Islam, there was little attention given to it. During the time of Al-Ma'mun, there was some of it, and he made this well-known instrument for observation called the instrument with rings. He began this, but did not complete it. When he died, its design was lost and neglected, and afterward, reliance was placed on ancient observations, which were insufficient due to the differences in movements over the ages. The correspondence of the instrument's movement to the observation of the movements of the spheres and planets is only approximate. This discipline is a noble craft, and is not as commonly understood. It does not provide an accurate representation of the heavens and the arrangement of the spheres and planets in reality, but rather it shows that these images and forms of the spheres are necessitated by these movements. You know that it is not far-fetched for one thing to be necessary for different things, and if we say that the movements are necessary, it is an inference from the necessary to the existence of the necessitated, and it does not provide the truth in any way, although it is a great science and one of the pillars of teachings. One of the best works in it is the book Al-Magisti, attributed to Ptolemy. He is not one of the kings of Greece whose names are Ptolemy, as clarified by the commentators of the book. The scholars among the wise men of Islam summarized it, as Ibn Sina did, and included it in the teachings of Al-Shifa. Ibn Rushd, also among the wise men of Andalusia, summarized it, as did Ibn al-Sam and Ibn Abi al-Salt in the book Al-Iqtisar. Ibn al-Farghani provided a summarized version, simplifying it and omitting its geometric proofs. And God taught man what he did not know. Glory be to him. There is no deity but him, the Lord of the worlds. Among its branches is the science of Al-Azyaj, which is a mathematical craft based on numerical laws concerning each planet according to its movement and what the proof of the discipline leads to regarding its speed, slowness, directness, retrogression, and other factors that determine the positions of the planets in their orbits at any given time, based on the calculations of their movements according to the laws extracted from the books of the discipline. This craft has laws, such as the preliminaries and principles for knowing the months, days, past dates, and established principles for understanding the aphelion, perihelion, inclinations, types of movements, and extracting some from others, which they arrange in a table for the convenience of learners, called Al-Azyaj. The extraction of the positions of the planets for the specified time in this craft is called Tadil and Taqwim. There are many works on this by both earlier and later scholars, such as Al-Batani and Ibn al-Kamad. The later scholars of this era in the Maghreb relied on a zij attributed to Ibn Ishaq, an astrologer from Tunisia in the early 7th century. They claim that Ibn Ishaq relied on observation, and that a Jew in Sicily, skilled in the discipline and teachings, had been concerned with observation and would send him information about the conditions of the planets and their movements, which made the people of the Maghreb interested in it due to its reputed reliability. Ibn al-Banna summarized it in a later work he called Al-Minhaj, which became popular among people due to its ease of use. It only requires the positions of the planets from the sphere to build upon them the astrological judgments, which are the knowledge of the effects that occur in relation to their positions in the human world regarding kings, states, human births, and events that occur, as we will clarify later and explain their evidence, if God wills. And God is the one who grants success to what he loves and is pleased with. There is no deity but him. Chapter 23. On the Science of Logic. It is a set of laws by which the correct is distinguished from the corrupt in the limits of knowledge of essences and the useful arguments for affirmations. And this is because the origin of perception is indeed the senses of the 5 senses. All animals share in this perception, both speaking and non-speaking, and the only distinction of humans from them is in the perception of universals, which are abstracted from the sensibles. This is achieved by forming in the imagination a common image from the agreed-upon individuals that applies to all those sensible individuals, which is the universal. Then the mind looks between those agreed-upon individuals and other individuals that correspond to them in some aspects. Thus, it obtains an image that also applies to both based on what they agree upon. It continues to ascend in abstraction to the universal that does not find another universal that corresponds with it, thus becoming simple. This is similar to abstracting from human individuals the image of the species that applies to them. Then it looks between it and the animal and abstracts the image of the genus that applies to both. Then it looks between them and the plant until it reaches the higher genus, which is substance, and finds no universal that corresponds with it in anything. Thus the mind stops there from abstraction. When God created man with the intellect by which he perceives knowledge and crafts, knowledge became either a conception of essences, which means a simple perception without any judgment accompanying it, or an affirmation, which is a judgment affirming the existence of one thing for another. Thus, the pursuit of the intellect in acquiring the desired knowledge is either by gathering those universals together in a way of composition to obtain a universal image in the mind that applies to individuals in the external world, making that mental image useful for knowing the essence of those individuals, or by judging one thing against another to affirm it, which is that affirmation. Its ultimate goal, in truth, returns to conception, because the benefit of that, once obtained, is merely the knowledge of the realities of things, which is the requirement of judicial knowledge. This pursuit of the intellect can be through a correct path or a corrupt one, necessitating the distinction of the path by which the intellect strives to acquire scientific knowledge to differentiate the correct from the corrupt, thus forming the law of logic. The ancients spoke about it, first in general terms and then in specific terms. Its methods were not refined, nor were its issues compiled until Aristotle appeared in Greece, who refined its discussions, organized its issues and sections, and made it the first of the judicial sciences and its introduction. Therefore, he is called the first teacher, and the specific writing on logic is called the text, which consists of 8 books, 4 of which are on the forms of syllogism and 4 on its matter. This is because the affirmative issues are of various kinds. Some of them require certainty by their nature, and some require art, which is of different ranks, appearing in syllogism based on the desired outcome it provides, and what its premises should be in that regard, and from what kind it should be, whether from knowledge or from art. One may look at the syllogism, not considering a specific desired outcome, but rather from the perspective of its production alone. The first perspective is said to be from the matter, meaning the matter producing the specific desired outcome of certainty or conjecture, and the second perspective is said to be from the form and the production of the syllogism in general. Thus, the books of logic are 8. The first is on the higher genera to which the abstraction of sensibles leads, which has no genus above it, and is called the Book of Categories. The second is on affirmative propositions and their types, called the Book of Assertion. The third is on syllogism and the form of its production in general, called the Book of Syllogism, which is the last perspective from the standpoint of form. Then the fourth is the Book of Demonstration, which is the consideration of the syllogism that produces certainty and how its premises should be certain. It has other conditions for producing certainty mentioned in it, such as being essential, primary, and others. In this book, there is discussion on definitions and limits, as the requirement in them is only certainty due to the necessity of conformity between the definition and the defined, which does not allow for anything else. Thus it is specified by the ancients in this book. The fifth is the Book of Dialectic, which is the syllogism that effectively cuts off disputes and silences the opponent, and what should be used in it from the commonplaces, and it also has other conditions for achieving this purpose mentioned there. In this book, the places from which the owner of the syllogism derives his syllogism are mentioned, and it includes the opposites of propositions. The sixth is the Book of Sophistry, which is the syllogism that provides a cover for the truth and deceives the debater, and it is corrupt. This was written to recognize the fallacious syllogism so that one may beware of it. The seventh is the Book of Rhetoric, which is the syllogism that effectively encourages the public and leads them to what is intended from them, and what should be used in that from the statements. The eighth is the Book of Poetry, which is the syllogism that provides representation and comparison specifically for attraction to something or aversion from it, and what should be used in it from imaginative propositions. These are the 8 books of logic according to the ancients. Then the Greek philosophers, after the craft was refined and organized, saw that it was necessary to discuss the 5 universals useful for the conception corresponding to essences in the external world, or their parts or accidents, which are genus, species, specific difference, property, and accident. They added a discourse specific to them as a preface to the art, making it 9, and all were translated in the Islamic community. The philosophers of Islam wrote and circulated them with explanations and summaries, as did Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, and then Ibn Rushd from the philosophers of Andalusia. Ibn Sina has a book called The Healing, in which he encompassed all the sciences of philosophy. Then the later scholars changed the terminology of logic and added to the discussion of the 5 universals its fruit, which is the discussion of definitions and descriptions, transferring them from the Book of Demonstration. They omitted the Book of Categories because the logical consideration in it is incidental, not essential. They included in the Book of Assertion the discussion of opposites, and although it is from the Book of Dialectic in the books of the ancients, it is a follow-up to the discussion of propositions in some respects. Then they discussed syllogism from the perspective of its production of the desired outcomes in general, not according to matter, and they focused their consideration on the matter, which are the 5 books: Demonstration, Dialectic, Rhetoric, Poetry, and Sophistry. Some may touch upon a little of it and neglect it, as if it were not the important foundation of the art. Then they spoke about what they established from that in a thorough manner, and considered it as an art in itself, not as a tool for sciences, so the discussion became lengthy and extensive. The first to do this was Imam Fakhr al-Din ibn al-Khatib, followed by Afdal al-Din al-Khunji, and his books are relied upon by the Eastern scholars of this era. He has in this craft a book called The Unveiling of Secrets, which is lengthy, and he summarized it in a concise summary, which is good for teaching, then a summary of the principles in about 4 pages, covering the essentials and foundations of the art, widely circulated among learners of this era for their benefit. The books and methods of the ancients were abandoned as if they had never existed, although they were filled with the fruits and benefits of logic, as we have said. And God is the guide to the right path. Know that this art has faced severe criticism for its adoption from the ancients and the theologians. They exaggerated in disparaging it and warning against it, prohibiting its learning and teaching. The later scholars, after them, from Al-Ghazali and Imam Ibn al-Khatib, were somewhat lenient in this regard. People have been inclined to adopt it since then, except for a few who lean towards the opinion of the ancients, thus turning away from it and exaggerating in denying it. Let us clarify for you the essence of the statement and the response to it, so you may understand the scholars' intentions in their doctrines. The theologians, when they established the science of theology to defend the faith-based beliefs with rational arguments, their method in this was with specific proofs, which they mentioned in their books, such as the proof of the world's creation by establishing purposes and their occurrence, and the impossibility of bodies being devoid of them, and that what is not devoid of occurrences is an occurrence, and to establish monotheism by the proof of mutual exclusion, and to establish the eternal attributes by the four universals, equating the unseen with the witnessed, and other proofs mentioned in their books. Then they passed those proofs through the establishment of principles and foundations that are like the premises for them, such as establishing the individual substance, the individual time, the void between bodies, denying nature, and the rational composition of essences, and that an accident does not remain for two times, and establishing the state, which is a property of the existent, neither existent nor non-existent, and other principles they built their specific proofs upon. Then Sheikh Abu al-Hassan, and Qadi Abu Bakr, and Professor Abu Ishaq went on to say that the proofs of beliefs are reflective in meaning, in that if they are invalidated, their implications are invalidated. For this reason, Qadi Abu Bakr saw that they are akin to beliefs, and disparaging them is disparaging the beliefs because they are based upon them. If you contemplate logic, you will find that it revolves entirely around rational composition and establishing the natural universal in the external world to correspond with the mental universal divided into the five universals, which are genus, species, specific difference, property, and accident, and this is false according to the theologians. The universal and the essential, according to them, are merely mental considerations, and there is nothing in the external world that corresponds to them, or a state for those who affirm it, thus invalidating the five universals and the definitions based upon them. The 10 categories and the essential accident are invalidated, and with its invalidation, the necessary essential propositions conditioned in the demonstration are invalidated, and the places that are the essence of the book of dialectic are invalidated. These are the places from which the common middle is taken between the two extremes in the syllogism, and only the formal syllogism remains, and from the definitions, the faults in the truthfulness of the individuals of the praiseworthy, which cannot be more knowledgeable than them, thus including others, and nothing specific is excluded, which is what the grammarians refer to as inclusion and exclusion, and the theologians as extension and opposition, and the foundations of logic collapse entirely. If we affirm these as in the science of logic, we invalidate many of the premises of the theologians, leading to the invalidation of their proofs for beliefs as mentioned. For this reason, the ancients among the theologians greatly criticized the adoption of logic, considering it an innovation or disbelief due to the attribution of the proof that invalidates. The later scholars from Al-Ghazali, when they denied the reflection of proofs, did not find it necessary that the invalidation of the proof leads to the invalidation of its implication, and they accepted the view of the logicians regarding rational composition and the necessity of natural essences and their universals in the external world, concluding that logic is not contrary to faith-based beliefs. Even if it contradicts some of their proofs, they may use it to invalidate many of those theological premises, such as denying the individual substance, the void, the persistence of accidents, and others, and they replace the proofs of the theologians for beliefs with other proofs that they validate through rational consideration and syllogism. This did not detract from their sound beliefs in any way. This is the view of the Imam and Al-Ghazali and those who followed them to this day, so contemplate that and understand the scholars' perspectives and their sources in what they advocate. And God is the guide and the facilitator to the right path. Chapter 24. On Natural Philosophy. It is a science that studies the body in terms of the movement and stillness that befalls it, examining celestial and elemental bodies and what arises from them, such as animals, humans, plants, and minerals, as well as what forms on earth, like springs and earthquakes, and in the atmosphere, such as clouds, steam, thunder, lightning, and other phenomena. It also addresses the principle of motion for bodies, which is the soul in its various forms in humans, animals, and plants. Aristotle's writings on this subject are available to people, translated along with other philosophical sciences during the time of Al-Mamun, and people have become accustomed to following them with explanation and commentary. Among those who wrote extensively on this was Ibn Sina in his book Al-Shifa, where he compiled the 7 sciences of philosophers as previously mentioned, then summarized it in the book Al-Najah and in the book Al-Isharat. where he seems to disagree with Aristotle on many of its issues and expresses his own opinions on them. As for Ibn Rushd, he summarized and explained Aristotle's books, following him without contradiction. Many people have written on this topic, but these are the well-known and respected works of this era in the field. The people of the East have a particular interest in the book Al-Isharat by Ibn Sina, and Imam Ibn al-Khatib has a good commentary on it, as does Al-Amidi, and also Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, known as Khawaja, from the East, who discussed many of its issues with the Imam, providing thorough insights and research. Above every knowledgeable person is one who is more knowledgeable, and God guides whom he wills to a straight path. Chapter 25. On the Science of Medicine. Among the branches of natural sciences is the art of medicine, which examines the human body in terms of illness and health. Its practitioner seeks to preserve health and cure diseases with medicines and foods after identifying the specific illness affecting each organ and the causes of those diseases, as well as the appropriate remedies for each illness, guided by the temperaments and powers of the medicines and the signs indicating the maturity of the illness and its acceptance of the remedy. First, this involves the nature, excretions, and pulse, aligning with the strength of nature, which governs both health and illness. The physician merely aligns with and assists it somewhat according to the nature of the material, season, and age, and the comprehensive science encompassing all of this is called the science of medicine. They may also discuss certain organs specifically and designate it as a separate science, such as the eye and its ailments and treatments. Similarly, they associated with the art, the climate of the organs, and the purpose for which each organ of the animal body was created. Although this is not the subject of the science of medicine, they considered it among its appendices and branches. The foremost figure in this field, whose works have been translated from ancient times, is Galen, who is said to have been contemporary with Jesus, peace be upon him, and is reported to have died in Sicily while traveling. His writings are the foundational texts that all physicians have followed after him. In Islam, there were prominent figures in this field who surpassed expectations, such as Al-Razi, the Magus, Ibn Sina, and many from Al-Andalus, the most famous of whom is Ibn Zuhr. At this time, in Islamic cities, it seems to have diminished due to the stagnation and decline of civilization, as it is one of the crafts that only civilization and luxury necessitate, as we will explain later. The rural inhabitants have a form of medicine that is often based on limited experience passed down from the elders of the community, and while some of it may be valid, it is not based on natural law or aligned with temperament. Among the Arabs, there was much of this medicine, and they had well-known physicians like Al-Harith ibn Qalada and others. The medicine mentioned in religious texts is of this kind and is not from revelation. It was merely a customary matter for the Arabs. The conditions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, are mentioned in a manner that reflects his habits and nature, not as a directive for such practices. He was sent to teach us the laws, and was not sent to instruct on medicine or other customary matters. He encountered the issue of pollinating date palms and said, "You know better about your worldly affairs." Therefore, nothing from the medicine found in the authentic hadiths should be interpreted as prescribed unless it is used for the sake of blessing and the truth of the faith contract, which can have a significant beneficial effect. This is not in temperamental medicine, but rather is a result of the faith-based word, as seen in the treatment of the dysentery patient with honey and similar remedies. And God is the guide to the right path. There is no Lord but Him. Chapter 26. On agriculture. This industry is one of the branches of natural sciences, and it involves the study of plants in terms of their growth and development through irrigation, treatment, and care. The early scholars paid great attention to it, and their examination of it was general regarding plants in terms of planting and growth, as well as their properties, spirituality, and their relationship to the spiritualities of the planets and the structures used in all of this in the realm of magic. Their concern for it was greatly amplified for that reason. The book, Agriculture of the Nabateans, attributed to the scholars of the Nabateans, was translated from Greek texts and contains significant knowledge on this subject. When the people of the faith examined what this book contained, and since the realm of magic was closed and its study prohibited, they limited their discussion to plants in terms of planting, treatment, and the issues that arise in that regard, completely omitting the discussion of the other art. Ibn al-Awwam summarized the book, Agriculture of the Nabateans, along these lines, while the other art remained neglected. He transferred from the writings of Muslim scholars in his magical books the essentials of some of its issues, as we will mention when discussing magic, God willing. The writings of later scholars on agriculture are numerous, and they do not exclude discussions on planting, treatment, and the care of plants regarding their needs and obstacles, and everything that arises in that regard, and they are available. Chapter 27. On the science of theology. It is a science that examines absolute existence, first in the general matters of the corporeal and spiritual realms, such as essences, unity, multiplicity, necessity, possibility, and others. Then it looks into the principles of existence, which are spiritual, followed by how existence emanate from them and their ranks, and finally the states of the soul after its separation from bodies and its return to the origin. It is considered a noble science by them, which they claim leads to the knowledge of existence as it truly is, and that this is the essence of happiness in their view. A response to them will follow. It is subsequent to natural sciences in their arrangement, and thus they call it the science of what lies beyond nature. The writings of the first teacher on this subject are available to people. Ibn Sina summarized it in the books Al-Shifa and Al-Najat, and Ibn Rushd also summarized it from the philosophers of Al-Andalus. When later scholars compiled the sciences of the people and documented them, Al-Ghazali responded to some of them, and then the later scholars mixed the issues of theology with the issues of philosophy due to their shared inquiries, and the subject of theology resembled that of divine matters, making them seem like one discipline. They altered the arrangement of the philosophers in the issues of natural sciences and divine matters, merging them into one discipline, presenting general matters first, followed by corporeal matters and their consequences, then spiritual matters and their consequences, and so on, as Imam Ibn al-Khatib did in the Eastern discussions, and all those who followed him among the scholars of theology. The science of theology became mixed with the issues of wisdom, and its books were filled with them, as if the purpose of both their subjects and issues were the same. This confusion has misled people, and it is correct because the issues of theology are merely beliefs received from the Sharia as transmitted by the predecessors without any recourse to reason or reliance on it, meaning they are only established through it. Reason is isolated from the Sharia and its perspectives, and what the theologians discuss in establishing arguments is not an inquiry into the truth therein. The reasoning by evidence, after it was not known, is a characteristic of philosophy. Rather, it is merely a search for a rational argument that supports the beliefs of faith and the doctrines of the predecessors and defends against the doubts of the people of innovation who claimed that their understandings in this matter were rational. This is after it is assumed to be correct by the transmitted evidence as received by the predecessors and believed in, and there is much difference between the two positions. The understandings of the bearer of the Sharia are broader due to their extensive scope compared to the understandings of rational perspectives. They are above and encompass them, drawing from divine lights, and do not fall under the law of weak reasoning and the limited understandings. Therefore, if the legislator guides us to an understanding, we should prioritize it over our own understandings and trust it over them, and we should not examine its correctness by rational understandings, even if it contradicts them. Rather, we should rely on what we have been commanded to believe and know, and remain silent about what we do not understand from that, entrusting it to the legislator and isolating reason from it. The theologians were only driven to this by the words of the people of heresy in opposing the beliefs of the predecessors with theoretical innovations, necessitating a response to them from the same type of their oppositions, which called for theoretical arguments and aligning the beliefs of the predecessors with them. As for examining the issues of natural sciences and divine matters regarding correctness and invalidity, this is not part of the subject of theology, nor of the nature of the theologians' perspectives. Know this to distinguish between the two disciplines, for they are mixed among the later scholars in their arrangement and composition, while the truth is that each is distinct from the other in subject and issues. The confusion arose from the unity of the demands in the arguments, and the objections of the theologians appeared as if they were establishing a request for reliance on evidence, which is not the case. Rather, it is a response to the atheists, and the required assumption is one of truth and knowledge. Similarly, the later scholars among the extremists of the Sufis also mix the issues of the two disciplines with their own, making the discourse one in all of them, such as their discussions on prophecies, unity, and other matters. The understandings in these three disciplines are different and distinct, and the farthest from the nature of the disciplines and sciences are the understandings of the Sufis, as they claim to have direct experience and flee from evidence, and direct experience is far from scientific understandings and their inquiries and consequences, as we have explained and will explain. And God guides whom he wills to a straight path, and God knows best what is correct. Chapter 28. On the sciences of magic and talismans. These are sciences regarding the ways in which human souls can influence the effects in the world of elements, either without assistance or with assistance from celestial matters. The former is magic, and the latter is talismans. Since these sciences are abandoned by religious laws due to their harmfulness and the requirement of directing them towards something other than God, such as a planet or otherwise, their books are like those lost among people. Except for what is found in the writings of ancient nations before the prophecy of Moses, peace be upon him, such as the Nabateans and Chaldeans, for all those who preceded the prophets did not establish laws nor bring forth rulings. Their books were merely admonitions, monotheism to God, and reminders of paradise and hell. These sciences were present among the people of Babylon, from the Syrians and Chaldeans, and among the Egyptians from the Copts and others. They had writings and traces in this regard, but only a little has been translated for us from their books, such as the Nabatean agriculture from the practices of the people of Babylon. People took this knowledge from it and specialized in it, and later, arrangements were made such as the manuscripts of the 7 planets and the Book of Tam Tam the Indian regarding the images of the degrees and planets, and others. Then, in the east, appeared Jabir ibn Hayyan, the great magician of this nation, who reviewed the books of the people, extracted the craft, delved into its essence, and produced other writings within it, elaborating extensively on it and on the craft of alchemy, as it is a branch of it. The transformation of qualitative bodies from one form to another occurs through the psychic power, not through practical craft. It is akin to magic, as we will mention in its place. Then came Muslim ibn Ahmad al-Majriti, the leader of the people of Andalusia in teachings and sorcery, who summarized all those books, refined them, and compiled their methods in his book titled The Ultimate of the Wise, and no one wrote in this science after him. To introduce here a preface that clarifies the reality of magic. Human souls, although one in type, are different in properties, and they are of kinds. Each kind is characterized by a unique property that does not exist in the other kind. These properties became innate and natural to their kind. The souls of the prophets, peace be upon them, have a property that prepares them to detach from human spirituality to royal spirituality until they become kings in that moment of detachment, and this is the meaning of revelation as mentioned in its place. In that state, they attain divine knowledge and communicate with the angels, peace be upon them, on behalf of God, the exalted and majestic, as previously mentioned. The extent of influence in the universes and the souls of magicians has a specific effect in the universes and the summoning of the spirituality of planets to act within them, influencing with psychic or demonic power. As for the influence of the prophets, it is divine support and a divine property, while the souls of the priests have the property of insight into the unseen through demonic powers. Thus, each kind is characterized by a property that does not exist in the other. The souls of magicians are of 3 ranks, which will be explained. The first is the one that influences solely by will, without any tool or assistance, and this is what philosophers call magic. The second involves assistance from the temperament of the celestial bodies or elements, or the properties of numbers, and they call it talismans, which is a weaker rank than the first. The third involves influence in imaginative powers. The possessor of this influence resorts to imaginative powers, manipulating them in a certain way, projecting various imaginations and representations of what he intends, and then brings it down to the senses of the viewers through the power of his soul influencing them. So the viewers see it as if it is external, while there is nothing of the sort. It is narrated about some that they see gardens, rivers, and palaces, while there is nothing of that, and this is called by philosophers sorcery or illusion. This details its ranks. Then this property exists in the magician by potential, like all human powers, and it only manifests through training. And the training of magic is all about directing towards celestial bodies, planets, and the upper worlds, and demons through various forms of glorification, worship, submission, and humility. Therefore, it is a direction towards something other than God, and directing towards something other than God is disbelief. For this reason, magic is considered disbelief, and disbelief is one of its materials and causes, as you have seen. This is why scholars differ on whether to kill the magician is due to his disbelief prior to his act, or due to his corrupting actions and the resulting corruption in the universes, and all is derived from it. Since the first two ranks of magic have a reality in the external world, while the last third rank has no reality, scholars differ on whether magic is real or merely an illusion. Those who assert that it has a reality look at the first two ranks, while those who say it has no reality look at the last third rank. There is no disagreement among them in the essence of the matter. Rather, it arises from the confusion of these ranks, and God knows best. Know that the existence of magic is beyond doubt among rational people due to the influence we mentioned, and it has been stated in the Quran. God, the Exalted, said, "But the devils disbelieved, teaching people magic, and what was revealed to the two angels in Babylon, Harut and Marut. And they did not teach anyone until they said, 'We are a trial, so do not disbelieve.' And from them, they learn that by which they cause separation between a man and his wife. But they do not harm anyone thereby, except by permission of God." The messenger of God, peace be upon him, was bewitched until it was imagined to him that he was doing something, and his magic was placed in a comb and a piece of string and buried in the well of Darwan. Then God, the Exalted, revealed to him in the 2 chapters of Seeking Refuge, and from the evil of the blowers in knots. Aisha, may God be pleased with her, said, "He would not recite over any of those knots in which he was bewitched, except that it would be undone." As for the existence of magic among the people of Babylon, who are the Chaldeans from the Nabateans and Syrians, it is abundant and has been stated in the Quran and reported in the news. Magic in Babylon and Egypt during the time of Moses, peace be upon him, had thriving markets. This is why Moses' miracle was of the same kind as what they claimed and practiced, and remnants of that remain in the wilderness of Upper Egypt, indicating that. We have seen with our own eyes those who depict the image of the bewitched person with the properties of things corresponding to what they intend and attempt, existing with the bewitched person, and similar meanings of names and attributes in uniting and separating. Then he speaks about that image he has established in place of the bewitched person, either literally or in meaning, and then he blows from his saliva after gathering it in his mouth by repeating the articulations of those letters from the evil speech and ties, that meaning to a cause he has prepared for it, hoping for the knot and the binding, and taking an oath from those he associates with from the jinn in his blowing in that act, feeling the determination of the resolve. For that structure and the evil names have a wicked spirit that exits with the blowing, attached to the saliva that comes out of his mouth in the blowing, causing evil spirits to descend from it, and the bewitched person experiences what the magician attempts. We have also witnessed among those who claim to practice magic and perform it, someone pointing to a garment or skin, and it becomes torn. He points to the bellies of sheep in their pastures, and if their intestines fall from their bellies to the ground. We have heard that in the land of India, to this day, there are those who point to a person, and his heart bursts, and he falls dead, and his heart is turned inside out, and nothing is found in his insides. He points to a pomegranate, and it opens, and nothing is found of its seeds. Likewise, we have heard that in the land of Sudan and the land of the Turks, there are those who bewitch the clouds to rain on specific lands. We have also seen wonders from the talismans in the beloved numbers, which are RKRFD, one of the 2 numbers being 220, and the other 284. The meaning of the beloved is that the parts of each one, which are half, third, quarter, sixth, fifth, and similar, when summed, equal the other number, hence they are called beloved. The practitioners of talismans have conveyed that these numbers have an effect in the affinity between the beloved and their gathering, when two examples are set for them. One with the ascendant of Venus, while it is in its house or exaltation, looking at the moon with a gaze of affection and acceptance, and the second ascendant being the seventh of the first, and one of the two numbers is placed on one of the representations and the other on the other. The one intended for affinity, I mean the beloved, is aimed at either the greater quantity or the greater parts, resulting in a great affinity between the beloved that hardly one can be separated from the other. This was stated by the author of The Ultimate and others among the leaders of this matter, and I have witnessed it through experience. Likewise, the seal of the lion, also called the seal of the pebbles, is that it is drawn in a mould in the shape of a lion, with its tail raised, biting a stone that it has divided in half, and before it is a snake image flowing from its legs to its face, with its mouth wide open, and on its back is a scorpion crawling. It is timed by drawing it at the moment the sun is in its exaltation and safe from misfortunes, and the moon is safe in a royal ascendant, considering the gaze of the Lord of the 10th to the Lord of the ascendant as a gaze of affection and acceptance, and it is suitable for what may be from the births of kings from noble signs, and it is raised in a yellow silk cloth after being dipped in perfume. They claim that its holder has a power over the kings in their dealings and services, and their subjugation that cannot be expressed. Likewise, for the kings, it has strength and power over those under their hands. The people of this matter have also mentioned this in The Ultimate and elsewhere, and I have witnessed it through experience. Likewise, the specific pentacle of the sun, they mentioned that it is placed at the moment the sun is in its exaltation and safe from misfortunes, and the moon is safe in a royal ascendant, considering the gaze of the Lord of the 10th to the Lord of the ascendant as a gaze of affection and acceptance, and it is suitable for what may be from the births of kings from noble signs, and it is raised in a yellow silk cloth after being dipped in perfume. They claim that it has an effect in the companionship of kings and their service and interaction, and similar matters are numerous. The book The Ultimate, by Muslim Ibn Ahmad al-Majriti, is a record of this craft, encompassing its completeness and the entirety of its issues. It has been mentioned to us that Imam al-Fakhr ibn al-Khatib wrote a book on this and named it The Hidden Secret, and that it is circulated among its people in the East, but we have not come across it. The Imam was not among the leaders of this matter as we believe, and perhaps the matter is otherwise. In the West, there are some of those who claim these magical works known as the Bajajin, and they are those I mentioned earlier who point to a garment or skin, and it becomes torn, and they point to the bellies of sheep with the badge, and they swell. One of them is called Bajajin to this day because most of what they claim to practice magic involves the swelling of livestock, intimidating their owners to give them from their surplus, and they are concealed in The Ultimate, out of fear for themselves from the rulers. I have encountered a group of them and witnessed their actions without doubt in that. This is the nature of magic and talismans and their effects in the world. As for philosophers, they distinguished between magic and talismans after establishing that both are effects of the human soul, and they argued for the existence of the effect of the human soul by stating that it has effects on its body that are not due to natural processes and physical causes, but rather effects arising from the qualities of spirits, sometimes like the heat that occurs from joy and happiness, and from the psychological perceptions, as occurs from imagination. For instance, a person walking on the edge of a wall or a taut rope, if the imagination of falling becomes strong, he will fall without a doubt. This is why you find many people training themselves on that until this imagination leaves them, and you find them walking on the edge of the wall and the taut rope without fearing falling. It has been established that this is an effect of the human soul and its imagination of falling due to the illusion. If this is an effect of the soul on its body without natural physical causes, it is permissible for it to have a similar effect on something other than its body, as its relation to bodies in that type of influence is the same, for it is neither residing in the body nor imprinted in it. Thus it has been established that it influences all bodies. As for the distinction between magic and talismans, magic does not require the magician to have assistance, while the practitioner of talismans relies on the spiritualities of planets, the secrets of numbers, the properties of existing things, and the arrangements of the influencing celestial bodies in the world of elements, as astrologers say. They say, Magic is the union of spirit with spirit, and talismans are the union of spirit with matter, and their meaning to them is the binding of the celestial, heavenly natures with the lower natures. The celestial natures are the spiritualities of the planets, and therefore its practitioner often relies on astrology. The magician, according to them, does not acquire his magic, but is innately endowed with that specific nature of influence. The distinction between miracles and magic is that a miracle is a divine power that inspires the soul with that influence. It is supported by the Spirit of God in that act. The magician only does that from his own self and with his psychic power and with the assistance of demons in some cases. Thus, there is a difference in rationality, reality, and essence in the matter itself. We distinguish between them by the apparent signs, which are the existence of miracles for the possessor of good and in the purposes of good, and for the souls striving for good, challenging with it the claim of prophecy. Magic, however, exists for the possessor of evil and in acts of evil, mostly in separating spouses and harming enemies and similar matters, for the souls striving for evil. This is the distinction between them according to divine philosophers. There may also be some Sufis and possessors of miracles who have an influence in the states of the world, but they are not counted among the types of magic. Rather, it is through divine support, because their path and doctrine are from the effects of prophecy and its followers, and they have in divine support a preservation according to their state, faith, and adherence to the word of God. If one of them is capable of acts of evil, he does not commit them because he is bound in what he does by the command of God. What they are not permitted to do, they do not do at all, and whoever does so among them has strayed from the path of truth and may have his state taken away. Since the miracle is by the support of the Spirit of God and divine powers, nothing from magic can oppose it. Look at the case of the magicians of Pharaoh with Moses in the miracle of the staff, how it swallowed what they were fabricating, and their magic vanished and diminished as if it had never been. Likewise, when it was revealed to the prophet, peace be upon him, in the 2 chapters of Seeking Refuge, and from the evil of the blowers in knots, Aisha, may God be pleased with her, said, he would not recite it over any of those knots in which he was bewitched, except that it would be undone. Magic does not stand against the name of God and his remembrance with the faith-filled will. Historians have reported that the Zarkash Kawayan, which is the banner of Khosrow, contained the numerical accord woven with gold in celestial arrangements that were observed for that accord. The banner was found on the day Rustam was killed at Qadisiyah, lying on the ground after the defeat and scattering of the Persians. It is claimed by the practitioners of talismans and accords to be specific for victory in wars, and that the banner which contains it, or is with it, does not face defeat at all. However, this was opposed by divine support from the faith of the companions of the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, and their adherence to the word of God, which caused every magical knot to unravel and not to stand against what they were doing. As for the Sharia, it did not distinguish between magic and talismans, considering them all as one forbidden category, because the actions that the legislator has permitted us are those that concern us in our religion, which is for the good of our hereafter, or in our livelihood, which is for the good of our worldly life, and what does not concern us in either of them, if it has harm or a type of harm, like the harm caused by magic, which results in harm upon occurrence, and talismans are included in that because their effects are the same, as well as astrology, which has a type of harm due to the belief in influence, corrupting the faith by attributing matters to other than God, making that act forbidden due to its harmfulness. If it is not important to us and has no harm, it is at least better to leave it as a means of drawing closer to God. For among the best of a person's Islam is to leave what does not concern him. Thus, the Sharia has made the door of magic, talismans and sorcery one single door due to their harmfulness and has specified it for prohibition and forbiddance. As for the distinction between miracles and magic, what the theologians mentioned is that it relates to the challenge, which is the claim of its occurrence in accordance with what was claimed. They said, the magician is diverted from such a challenge, so it does not occur from him. The occurrence of a miracle in accordance with the claim of a liar is not possible because the indication of a miracle of truth is rational, as its very nature is to affirm. If it were to occur with falsehood, it would be impossible for the truthful to be a liar, which is impossible. Therefore, a miracle does not occur with a liar in general. As for the philosophers, the distinction between them is, as we have mentioned, the difference between good and evil at the extremes of both. The magician does not produce good, nor does he use it in the causes of good, while the possessor of a miracle does not produce evil, nor does he use it in the causes of evil, as if they are at opposite ends in their original nature. And God guides whom he wills, and he is the mighty, the exalted, and there is no Lord besides him. Among these psychological influences is the evil eye, which is an effect from the eye of the beholder when he admires something from beings or states and excessively admires it, leading to envy that seeks to deprive that thing from the one who possesses it, causing its corruption. This is an innate nature, I mean this effect of the evil eye. The distinction between it and psychological influences is that its emergence is innate and natural, does not change, nor does it return to the choice of its owner, nor is it acquired. Other influences, even if some are not acquired, their emergence is related to the choice of their doer, and the innate ones have a strong emergence. This is why they said, "The killer by magic or by a miracle is killed, while the killer by the evil eye is not killed." This is only because it is not something he intends or aims for, nor does he leave it. Rather, he is compelled in its emergence, and God knows best what is in the unseen and is aware of what is in the hearts. Editor's note. The remainder of the chapter utilizes a lot of Arabic letters that might be lost in translation when ported to English. We will conclude this chapter at this note and proceed with the following chapters. Chapter 29. The Science of the Secrets of Letters, Part 2. Editor's note. This chapter also utilizes a lot of Arabic letters that might be lost in translation. For the sake of consistency and accuracy, we opted to skip it and move on to following chapters. We are planning to make our books available in text form in the future. We'll keep you updated when this is launched, materialized. Chapter 30. On the science of alchemy, which is a science that examines the material through which gold and silver are produced by industry and explains the work that leads to that. They explore all the components after knowing their mixtures and powers, hoping to find the material prepared for that, even from animal muscles like bones, feathers, eggs, and excrement, in addition to metals. Then it explains the works that bring that material from potential to action, such as dissolving bodies into their natural parts through sublimation and distillation, solidifying the melted ones through calcination, and softening the hard through coercion and rigidity, and similar processes. They claim that through all these industries, a natural body is produced, which they call the elixir. It is applied to the metallic body, prepared to accept the form of gold or silver with a readiness close to action, such as lead, tin, and copper, after being heated by fire, turning it into pure gold. They refer to this elixir in their jargon as the spirit, and the body to which it is applied as the body. Thus, the explanation of these terms and the nature of this industrial work that transforms these prepared bodies into the form of gold and silver is the science of alchemy. People have continued to write about it, both ancient and modern. Sometimes discussions about it are attributed to those who are not its experts. The foremost of the documented scholars in this field is Jabir ibn Hayyan, to the extent that they specifically refer to it as the science of Jabir, and he has 70 treatises in it, all resembling riddles. They claim that only one who has comprehensive knowledge of all that is in it can unlock its secrets. Al-Tughra'i, one of the later sages of the East, has written volumes and debates on it with its scholars and others. Muslima al-Majriti, a sage from Andalusia, wrote in this field a book he called The Rank of the Wise, which he paired with another book on magic and talismans called The Ultimate of the Wise. He claimed that these two crafts are the results of wisdom and the fruits of knowledge, and whoever does not grasp them is devoid of the fruit of knowledge and wisdom altogether. His words in that book, and the words of all of them in their writings, are riddles that are difficult to understand for those who have not been trained in their terminology. We will mention the reason for their resorting to these symbols and riddles. Ibn al-Mughayribi, one of the leaders in this field, has poetic verses on the letters of the alphabet that are among the most creative in poetry, all riddled with puzzles and enigmas that are hardly understood. They may attribute some writings in this field to Al-Ghazali, may God have mercy on him, but this is not correct, as the man's high intellect would not allow him to be misled by the errors they pursue until he adopts them. They may also attribute some doctrines and sayings in this field to Khalid ibn Yazid ibn Muawiyah, the foster son of Marwan ibn al-Hakam, and it is well known that Khalid is from the Arab generation and closer to nomadism, so he is far from the sciences and methodology in general. How could he engage in a craft of such a strange nature, based on knowledge of the natures of compounds and their mixtures, and the writings of those who observe this from natural sciences and medicine had not yet appeared or been translated, unless there is another Khalid ibn Yazid from those with industrial insights who resembles him by name, which is possible. Here, I will convey to you the letter of Abu Bakr ibn Bishrun to Abu al-Sam in this craft, and both are students of Muslima, from which one can infer his views on the matter if given due consideration. Ibn Bishrun said after the introduction of the letter, which is outside the main topic, "The preliminaries of this noble craft have been mentioned by the ancients, and all of them have been summarized by the philosophers from the knowledge of the formation of minerals, the creation of stones and gems, and the nature of regions and places. They prevented its widespread mention, but I will clarify for you from this craft what is necessary to begin with. They said, students of this science should first know three qualities. The first is whether it exists. The second is from what it is made. The third is how it is made. If one knows these three and masters them, he has achieved his goal and reached the end of this science. As for the inquiry about its necessity and the reasoning for its existence, we have provided you with what we sent to you regarding the elixir. As for what it is made from, they mean by that the search for the stone that can work, and although work exists in everything potentially, because it is composed of the four natures from which it was initially formed and to which it returns ultimately, yet some things may exist in potential but not in actuality. This is because some can be detailed, treated, and managed, and these are the ones that move from potential to action, while those that cannot be detailed cannot be treated or managed because they exist in potential only. The reason they cannot be detailed is that some of their natures are absorbed into others, and the strength of the larger one prevails over the smaller. Therefore, it is necessary for you, may God guide you, to know the most suitable separated stones in which work can be done, their type, strength, and work, and what is managed from dissolution, binding, purification, calcination, drying, and turning. For whoever does not know these principles, which are the foundation of this craft, will not succeed and will never achieve any good. You should also know whether it can be assisted by something else, or if it suffices by itself, and whether it is singular in the beginning, or if it shares with others, and thus becomes one in management, hence called a stone. You should also know how it works, its weight and timing, and how the spirit is composed in it, and how the soul is introduced to it. Can fire detail it after its composition? If it cannot, for what reason, and what is the cause of that? For this is the goal, so understand. Know that all philosophers praised the soul and claimed it is the manager of the body, the bearer of it, the defender of it, and the doer within it. This is because when the soul leaves the body, it dies and cools, and it cannot move or resist anything else because there is no life in it and no light. I mentioned the body and the soul because these attributes are similar to the human body, which is composed of nourishment and sustenance, and its essence and completion are through the living, luminous soul, with which it performs great deeds and actions that no one else can do with the living power within it. A person is affected by the differences in the composition of their natures, and if their natures were the same, they would be free from ailments and oppositions, and the soul would not be able to leave its body, and it would be eternal. Glory be to the manager of all things, the Most High. Know that the natures that give rise to this work are initially a driving force that is vital and needs to end, and once it reaches this limit, it cannot transform into what it was composed of, as we mentioned earlier in the case of humans, because the natures of this essence have adhered to one another and have become one thing, resembling the soul in its power and action, and the body in its composition and mass after being individual natures in their essence. How astonishing are the actions of the natures! The strength of the weak that can detail and compose things and complete them. Hence I said strong and weak. The expression and annihilation occurred in the first composition due to the differences, and the absence of that in the second due to the agreement. Some of the ancients said that detailing and cutting in this work is life and permanence, while composition is death and annihilation. This statement is profound in meaning because the wise intended by his words life and permanence to mean moving from non-existence to existence. For as long as it remains in its original composition, it is inevitably perishable. When it is composed in the second composition, it is free from annihilation. The second composition cannot occur except after detailing and cutting, so detailing and cutting are specific to this work. When the dissolved body remains, it expands within it due to the absence of form, because it has become in the body like the soul that has no form, as it has no weight within it, and you will see that, God willing. You should know that the mixing of the subtle with the subtle is easier than the mixing of the dense, and I mean by that the similarity in spirits and bodies because things connect with their forms. I mentioned this to make you understand that the work is more suitable and easier than the subtle natures of the spiritual ones compared to the dense corporeal ones. It may be conceived in the mind that stones are stronger and more resistant to fire than spirits, as you see that gold, iron and copper are more resistant to fire than sulfur, mercury and other spirits. I say that the bodies were once spirits in their essence, and when they were subjected to the heat of existence, they turned into dense, viscous bodies, so fire could not consume them due to their excessive density and viscosity. If the fire were to excessively act upon them, it would turn them back into spirits as they were at the beginning of their creation. And those subtle spirits, when subjected to fire, remain and cannot endure it. You should know what turns bodies into this state and what turns spirits into this state. This is the most important thing you should know. I say that those spirits remain due to their ignition and subtlety. They ignite due to their high moisture, and when fire senses moisture, it clings to it because it is airy and resembles fire, and it continues to feed on it until it is consumed. Likewise, bodies, when they sense the arrival of fire, due to their low viscosity and density, do not ignite because they are composed of earth and water, resistant to fire, with the subtle uniting with the dense due to prolonged gentle cooking that mixes things. Every perishable thing perishes in fire due to the separation of its subtle from its dense and the entry of some into others without analysis and agreement, thus that joining and intermingling becomes proximity, not mingling, making their separation easy, like water and oil and similar things. I describe this to guide you on the composition of natures and their interactions. If you understand this knowledge thoroughly, you have taken your share of it. You should know that the mixtures that are the natures of this craft are compatible with one another, detailed from one essence, united by one system through one management, with no foreign element entering into any part of it or the whole, as the philosopher said. If you master the management of natures and their compositions, and do not introduce a foreign element into them, you have mastered what you intended to master and sustain, for nature is one and has no foreign element in it. Whoever introduces a foreign element into it has deviated from it and has fallen into error. Know that this nature, if a body is dissolved from its counterparts as it should be in dissolution until it resembles it in subtlety and lightness, it expands within it and flows with it wherever it goes. For as long as the bodies remain dense and harsh, they do not expand or unite, and the dissolution of bodies cannot occur without spirits. So understand this statement. May God guide you. Know, may God guide you, that this dissolution in the body of an animal is the truth that does not diminish or decrease, and it is what transforms and holds the natures and reveals to them strange colors and flowers. Not every body that dissolves contrary to this is the complete dissolution, because it is contrary to life. Rather, its dissolution is what agrees with it and protects it from the burning of fire until it is freed from density, and the natures transform from their states to what they can transform into from subtlety and density. When bodies reach their limit of analysis and refinement, a power appears in them that holds, penetrates, transforms, and executes, and every work that does not have a proof of its beginning has no good in it. Know that the cold from the natures dries things and binds their moisture, while the hot reveals their moisture and binds their dryness. I have singled out heat and cold because they are active, while moisture and dryness are passive, and upon the passivity of each one to its counterpart, bodies occur and are formed, and heat is more active in that than cold because cold has no power to move things, while heat is the cause of movement. Whenever the cause of existence, which is heat, weakens, nothing will ever be completed from it. Just as if excessive heat acts upon something and there is no cold, it burns and destroys it. For this reason, cold is needed in these works to empower each opposite against its opposite and protect it from the heat of fire. The philosophers have warned against nothing more than the burning fires. They commanded the purification of natures and breaths, and the removal of their impurities and moisture, and the repulsion of their pests and filth from them. Thus, their opinions and management were established. Their work is primarily with fire, and ultimately returns to it, which is why they said, "Beware of the burning fires." They meant by that the removal of the pests that accompany it, for 2 pests may gather on the body, leading to its swift destruction. Likewise, everything perishes and decays from its essence, due to the opposition of its natures and their differences, so it becomes caught between 2 things and finds nothing to strengthen and assist it, except that the pest overcomes it and destroys it. Know that all the sages have mentioned the repeated return of spirits to bodies multiple times to be more attached to them and stronger against fire when they encounter it upon familiarity, meaning the elemental fire, so understand that. Now let us move on to the stone from which work can be done, as the philosophers have mentioned. They have differed about it. Some claimed it is in animals, some claimed it is in plants, some claimed it is in minerals, and some claimed it is in all. These claims do not require us to exhaust them and debate their proponents, because the discussion would be very lengthy. I have previously stated that work can be done in everything potentially because natures exist in everything, so we want to know from what the work can be done in potential and action. We aim for what Al-Harani said: all dyeing is one of 2 dyes, either the dye of a body, like saffron in a white cloth until it transforms within it, and it is dissolved and its composition is disrupted, and the second dye is the transformation of essence from its essence to another essence and its color, like the transformation of soil into itself and the transformation of animals and plants into themselves until the soil becomes a plant and the plant becomes an animal. And this can only occur with the living spirit and the active essence that has the ability to generate bodies and transform essences. If this is the case, we say that work must be done either in animals or in plants, and the proof of that is that they are both imprinted with nourishment, which is their sustenance and completion. As for plants, they do not possess what animals have in terms of subtlety and strength, and that is why the philosophers have less engaged in them. As for animals, they are the final transformation of the 3 transformations, for minerals transform into plants, and plants transform into animals, and animals do not transform into anything subtler than them unless they revert back to density. Also, there is nothing in the world that the living spirit can attach to other than it, and the spirit is the subtlest thing in the world, and the spirit does not attach to animals except by resembling them. As for the spirit in plants, it is slight, with some density and thickness, and it is also absorbed and hidden within it due to its density and the density of the plant body, so it cannot move due to its density and the density of its spirit. The moving spirit is much subtler than the hidden spirit, for the moving one has the ability to accept nourishment, move, and breathe, while the hidden one has only the ability to accept nourishment. It does not flow when compared to the living spirit, except like the earth in relation to water. Likewise, the plant in relation to the animal, so work in animals is higher, loftier, easier, and more straightforward. Therefore, the wise person, if he knows that, should try what is easy and leave what he fears may be difficult. Know that animals, according to the philosophers, are divided into categories of mothers, which are the natures, and recent ones, which are the offspring, and this is well known and easy to understand. Therefore, the philosophers divided the elements and the offspring into living and dead categories, making every mover a living agent and every still one a dead effect. They divided this in all things, and in melting bodies, and in mineral remedies, calling everything that melts in fire and flies and ignites alive, while what is contrary to that they called dead. As for animals and plants, They called everything that separates from them four natures alive, and what does not separate they called dead. Then they sought all the living categories. They found no four apparent separable natures for this craft, except for the stone in animals. So they searched for its type until they recognized it, took it, and managed it, and they were able to shape from it what they desired. Such shaping can also occur in minerals and plants after gathering remedies and mixing them, then separating them afterward. As for plants, some of them separate with some of these natures, like the algae, and as for minerals, they have bodies, spirits, and breaths, and when mixed and managed, some of them have an effect. We have managed all of that, and animal work is higher and loftier, and its management is easier and more straightforward. Therefore, you should know what the stone is that exists in animals and how it exists. We have clarified that animals are the highest of the offspring, and thus what is composed of them is subtler than them, like plants from the earth. The plant is subtler than the earth because it is composed of its pure essence and its subtle body, thus it deserves that subtlety and lightness. Likewise, this animal stone is like the plant in the soil. In summary, there is nothing in animals that separates into four natures other than it, so understand this statement, for it is hardly hidden except from an ignorant person who is between ignorance and one who has no intellect. I have informed you of the essence of this stone and made its type known to you, and I will clarify for you the ways of its management until what we have promised ourselves of fairness is completed, God willing. Management, with God's blessing, take the precious stone and place it in the crucible and the alembic, and separate its four natures, which are fire, air, earth, and water, which are the body and the dye. When you separate the water from the earth and the air from the fire, raise each one in its vessel separately, and take the sediment at the bottom of the vessel, which is the dregs, and wash it with hot fire until its blackness is removed, and its density and harshness are eliminated, and whiten it with a thorough whitening, and remove from it the excess hidden moisture, for it will then become white water with no darkness or filth or opposition in it. Then, turn to those first rising natures, and purify them also from blackness and opposition, and repeat the washing and sublimation on them until they become subtle, light, and pure. If you do that, God has opened for you, so begin with the composition that the work revolves around. That is because composition can only occur through coupling and mixing. As for coupling, it is the mixing of the subtle with the dense, and as for mixing, it is the grinding and crushing, until some of it mixes with some, and becomes one thing with no difference or deficiency, like mixing with water. At that point, the dense can hold the subtle, and the spirit can withstand the fire and endure it, and the soul can dive into the bodies and move within them. This was found only after composition, because when the dissolved body was coupled with the spirit, it mingled with all its parts, and some entered into others due to their similarity, thus becoming one thing, and it was necessary for the spirit to experience goodness and corruption, permanence and stability, and what befalls the body due to the place of mingling. Likewise, when the soul mingles with them and enters into them through the service of management, its parts mix with all the parts of the others, meaning the spirit and the body, and it becomes one thing with them, with no difference, like the whole part whose natures are intact and whose parts are in agreement. When this compound is cast into the dissolved body and the fire is applied to it, it reveals what is in it of moisture on its surface, melting into the dissolved body. Moisture has the nature of encompassing and clinging to fire, and when fire wants to cling to it, it is prevented from uniting with the soul due to the mingling of water with it. Fire does not unite with oil until it is pure. Likewise, water has the nature of repelling fire. When fire insists on it and wants to vaporize it, the dry body that mingles with it in its interior prevents it from flying, so the body becomes the cause of holding the water, and the water is the cause of the oil's permanence, and the oil is the cause of the dye's stability, and the dye is the cause of revealing the oil and showing the oiliness in dark things that have no light or life. This is the upright body, and thus the work is done. This purification that you asked about is what the philosophers called the egg, and they mean it, not the chicken egg. Know that the philosophers did not name it this for no reason, but because it resembles it. I once asked Muslima about this when there was no one else with him, and I said to him, "O wise one, tell me why the philosophers named the animal compound an egg. Was it by their choice, or for a reason that prompted them? He said, rather, for a hidden reason. I said, O wise one, what benefit and evidence did they find in the craft that led them to liken it and name it an egg? He said, for its similarity and closeness to the compound, so think about it, for its meaning will become clear to you. I remained before him pondering, unable to reach its meaning. When he saw my contemplation, and that my soul was engaged in it, he took my arm and shook me lightly and said, O Abu Bakr, that is for the relationship between them in the quantity of colours when the natures mix and compose. When he said that, the darkness lifted from me, and the light of my heart shone, and my mind became strong enough to understand it. So I stood up, thanking God for it, and returned home, establishing a geometric shape to prove the correctness of what Muslima said. I will present it to you in this book. An example of that is that when the compound is complete, the ratio of what is in it from the nature of air to what is in the egg from the nature of air is like the ratio of what is in the compound from the nature of fire to what is in the egg from the nature of fire. Likewise, the other two natures, earth and water. I say that every two things that are proportionate in this manner are similar. An example of that is to make the surface of the egg a hexagon. If we want that, we take the least of the natures of the compound, which is the nature of dryness, and add to it an equal amount of the nature of moisture, and manage them until the nature of dryness absorbs the nature of moisture and accepts its strength. It seems that in this statement there is a symbol, but it will not be hidden from you. Then you carry on both of them an equal amount of spirit, which is water, so that all together becomes 6 times. Then you carry on all of them after management, an example from the nature of air, which is the soul, and that is 3 parts, so that all together becomes 9 times the dryness in potential. You place under each 2 sides of the compound, which is surrounded by the surface of the compound, 2 natures, making the first 2 sides surrounding its surface, the nature of water and the nature of air, which are the first side and the surface of the hexagon, and likewise the 2 sides surrounding the surface of the egg, which are water and air, the sides of the hexagon. I say that the surface of the hexagon resembles the surface of the egg, the nature of air that is called the soul, and likewise the surface of the compound. The philosophers did not name anything after something else except for its resemblance to it. The words you asked about explain the Holy Land, which is composed of the upper and lower natures. Copper is what has had its blackness removed and has been cut until it became dust. Then it was reddened with vitriol until it became coppery, and the magnetite is their stone in which spirits solidify, and the upper nature that spirits are hidden in to confront fire, and the red color is a deep red that is produced by existence. Lead is a stone with 3 different powers of appearances, but they are similar and homogeneous. The first is a luminous, pure spiritual power, which is the active one. The second is a sensitive, moving psychic power, but it is denser than the first, and its center is lower than the center of the first. And the third is an earthy, sensitive, contracting power that is reflected to the center of the earth due to its heaviness, and it is the one that holds both the spiritual and psychic powers and surrounds them. As for the rest, they are innovative and invented, misleading the ignorant, and whoever knows the preliminaries is sufficient without others. This is all that you asked me about, and I have sent it to you explained, and we hope with God's success that you achieve your desire, and peace be upon you. Thus ends the words of Ibn Bishrun, who is one of the major students of Muslima al-Majriti, the master of Andalusia in the sciences of alchemy, chemistry, and magic in the 3rd century and beyond. You see how they directed all their terms in the craft to symbols and riddles that are hardly clear or known, and this is evidence that it is not a natural craft. What should be believed about alchemy, which is the truth supported by reality, is that it is of the kind of effects of spiritual souls and their influence in the world of nature, either of the type of miracles, if the souls are good, or of the type of magic, if the souls are evil and wicked. As for miracles, they are evident, and as for magic, it is because the magician, as established in the place of its verification, transforms material essences with his magical power. He must also have a material in which his magical effect occurs, like creating some animals from the material of soil or trees and plants, and in general from outside their specific material, as occurred with the magicians of Pharaoh with ropes and sticks, and as is reported about the magicians of Sudan and India in the far south, and the Turks in the far north, that they enchant the atmosphere for rain and other things. Since this is a creation of gold from outside its specific material, it falls under the category of magic, and those who speak of it are among the prominent sages like Jabir and Muslima. Those who preceded them from the sages of nations have inclined towards this approach, and that is why their words in it are riddles, cautious of the denial of the laws regarding magic and its types. Not that it returns to the suspicion of it, as is the opinion of those who do not delve into the verification of that. Look how Muslima named his book in it The Rank of the Wise, and named his book on magic and talismans The Ultimate of the Wise, indicating the general subject of the ultimate and the specific subject of this, for the ultimate is higher than the rank, so the issues of the rank are part of the issues of the ultimate and share in the subjects. From his words in the two fields, it becomes clear what we have said, and we will clarify later the error of those who claim that the understanding of this matter is through natural craft. And God is all-knowing, all-aware. Chapter 31. On the refutation of philosophy and the corruption of its adherents. This chapter and the following are important because these sciences are prevalent in civilization and abundant in cities. Their harm to religion is significant, so it is necessary to address them and reveal the true belief regarding them. Some rational individuals among humanity claim that all existence, both the sensory and the metaphysical, can be understood through its causes and conditions by means of intellectual contemplation and logical reasoning, and that the validation of faith-based beliefs comes from reasoning rather than from hearing, as they are part of the faculties of the mind. These individuals are called philosophers, a term derived from the Greek language meaning lovers of wisdom. They investigated this matter, engaged in it, and sought to achieve its objective, establishing a law by which the mind can discern between truth and falsehood, which they named logic. The essence of their argument is that the contemplation which enables the distinction between truth and falsehood is a mental process involving concepts abstracted from individual existence. Initially, it abstracts forms that apply to all individuals, just as a seal applies to all impressions made in clay or wax. These abstractions from the sensory world are called primary intelligibles. Then, if those universal meanings share commonalities with other meanings, they are further abstracted from those shared meanings. This process continues until the abstraction reaches simple universal meanings that apply to all concepts and individuals, beyond which no further abstraction is possible, and these are the higher genera. All these abstractions, being non-sensory, are combined to acquire knowledge, and they are called secondary intelligibles. When the intellect contemplates these abstract intelligibles and seeks to conceive of existence as it is, the mind must relate some of them to others and negate some from others through certain rational proofs to achieve a correct and accurate conception of existence, provided that this is done according to a valid law as previously mentioned. The type of affirmation, which is that relation and judgment, is considered by them to precede the type of conception in the end, while conception precedes it in the beginning and education, as complete conception is their ultimate goal of understanding, and affirmation is merely a means to it. What you hear in the writings of logicians about the precedence of conception and the dependence of affirmation on it refers to a sense of awareness, not to complete knowledge. This is the view of their great leader, Aristotle. They claim that happiness lies in the comprehension of all existence, both sensory and metaphysical, through this contemplation and those proofs. The essence of their understanding of existence, in general, and what they derived from it, is that they first encountered the lower body through sensory experience and observation. Then their understanding advanced slightly, leading them to perceive the existence of the soul through movement and sensation in animals. They then sensed the powers of the soul through the authority of reason. Their understanding then concluded about the higher celestial body in a manner similar to their conclusion about the essence of humanity. They believed that the heavens must possess a soul and intellect, just as humans do, and they concluded this with a finite number of entities, which is 10, 9 detailed entities, and 1 singular entity, which is the 10th. They assert that happiness lies in the comprehension of existence in this manner, along with the refinement of the soul and its cultivation with virtues, and that this is possible for humans, even without divine law, to distinguish between virtue and vice, in actions according to their reason and contemplation, inclining towards the commendable and avoiding the reprehensible by their nature. They believe that when this occurs for the soul, it experiences joy and pleasure, and ignorance of this is eternal misery. This, for them, is the meaning of bliss and punishment in the afterlife, leading to confusion in their details, which is well known in their writings. The leader of these doctrines, who compiled its issues and documented its knowledge and arguments, as we have received it in these times, is Aristotle the Macedonian, from Macedonia in the land of the Romans, a student of Plato and the teacher of Alexander. He is referred to as the first teacher in general, meaning the teacher of the art of logic, as it had not been refined before him. He was the first to organize its law, exhaust its issues, and articulate it well. He excelled in that law as he wished, had he taken care to address their intentions in theology. After him, in Islam, there were those who adopted these doctrines and followed them closely, except in minor aspects. This is because the books of those early scholars, when translated by the Abbasid caliphs from Greek into Arabic, were reviewed by many of the community, and some misguided individuals among the scholars adopted their doctrines and debated them, differing in various issues of their branches. Among the most famous of them were Abu Nasr al-Farabi in the 4th century, during the time of Saif al-Dawla, and Abu Ali ibn Sina in the 5th century, during the time of Nizam al-Mulk of the Buyid dynasty in Isfahan, among others. Know that this opinion they held is false in all its aspects. As for their attribution of all existence to the first intellect, and their reliance on it for assent to the necessary being, it is a deficiency regarding what lies beyond that in the ranks of God's creation. Existence is broader in scope than that, and he creates what you do not know. Their limitation to affirming only the intellect, and their neglect of what lies beyond it, is akin to the naturalists who limit themselves to affirming only bodies, turning away from transmission and reason, believing that there is nothing beyond the body in God's wisdom. As for the proofs they claim to support their assertions about existence, and which they present according to the standards of logic, they are deficient and do not fulfill the purpose. As for those concerning corporeal existence, which they call natural science, their deficiency lies in the uncertainty of the correspondence between those mental results derived from definitions and syllogisms, as they claim, and what exists externally, because those are general mental judgments, while external existence are particularized by their materials. There may be in the materials something that prevents the correspondence of the general mental concept to the particular external one, except for what is not attested by the senses. Its proof is its sensory observation, not those proofs. So where is the certainty they find in it? Moreover, the mind's manipulation of primary intelligibles may correspond to particulars through imaginary forms, not in secondary intelligibles, which are abstracted in the second rank. Thus, the judgment at that point would be certain, akin to the sensory, as primary intelligibles are closer to external correspondence due to their complete applicability. We may concede their claims in that regard, but it is necessary for us to refrain from contemplating them, as it is from the abandonment of a Muslim to what does not concern him. The issues of natural sciences do not concern us in our religion or our livelihood, so we must leave them aside. As for those concerning existence beyond the senses, which they call divine science and metaphysics, their essences are entirely unknown, and it is impossible to reach them or prove them, as the abstraction of intelligibles from external personal existence is only possible for what is perceivable to us. We do not perceive spiritual essences to abstract from them other essences, as there is a veil of sensory experience between us and them, so no proof comes to us for them, nor do we have a means to establish their existence in general, except for what we find within ourselves regarding the human soul and its states, especially in dreams, which are evident to everyone. Beyond that, their reality and attributes are obscure, and there is no way to grasp them. Their scholars have explicitly stated that anything without matter cannot be proven, as the premises of proof must be inherent. Their great leader, Plato, said that in divine matters one cannot reach certainty, and one can only speak in terms of conjecture. If we can only attain conjecture after effort and toil, then the initial conjecture suffices us. What benefit is there in these sciences and engaging with them when our concern is to attain certainty regarding existence beyond the senses? This is the ultimate goal of human thought according to them. As for their claim that happiness lies in the comprehension of existence, as they are through those proofs, it is a false and rejected statement. Its interpretation is that man is composed of two parts, one corporeal and the other spiritual, intertwined. Each of these parts has its own specific faculties, and the faculty in both is one, which is the spiritual part that sometimes perceives spiritual intelligibles and sometimes corporeal intelligibles. However, the spiritual intelligibles are perceived directly by itself without intermediaries, while the corporeal intelligibles are perceived through the body's instruments, such as the brain and senses. Every perceiver experiences joy in what it perceives. Consider the case of a child in its initial corporeal perceptions. It rejoices in what it sees of light and hears of sounds. There is no doubt that the joy of the soul in its perception of itself directly, without intermediaries, is greater and more pleasurable. Thus, when the spiritual soul perceives its own perception directly, it experiences a joy and pleasure that cannot be expressed. This perception does not arise from contemplation or knowledge, but occurs by lifting the veil of sensory experience and forgetting corporeal perceptions altogether. The mystics often emphasize the attainment of this perception for the soul through the experience of this joy, striving through ascetic practices to suppress corporeal powers and their perceptions, even the intellect from the brain, so that the soul may attain its perception directly when the distractions and corporeal obstacles are removed, resulting in a joy and pleasure that cannot be expressed. This claim, even if valid, does not fulfill their intended purpose. As for their assertion that logical proofs and rational evidence lead to this type of perception and joy, it is false, as you have seen, since proofs and evidence are part of corporeal perceptions, arising from the brain's faculties of imagination, thought, and memory. We assert that the first thing we should focus on to attain this perception is to suppress all these brain faculties, as they are antagonistic to it and detrimental. You will find among them those who are engrossed in the Book of Healing, the Book of Indications, the Book of Salvation, and the summaries of Ibn Rushd, which are compilations of Aristotle and others, scattering their pages and securing their proofs, seeking this portion of happiness therein, unaware that they are thereby increasing their obstacles to it. Their basis for this is what they transmit from Aristotle, Al-Farabi, and Ibn Sina, that whoever attains the perception of the active intellect and connects with it in their lifetime has attained a share of this happiness. The active intellect, according to them, is the first rank revealed by the senses from the ranks of spiritual entities, and they equate connection with the active intellect to scientific perception. However, I have shown its fallacy, as Aristotle and his companions mean by that connection and perception, the perception of the soul that it has from itself, and without intermediaries, which can only be attained by lifting the veil of sensory experience. As for their claim that the joy arising from this perception is the very happiness promised, it is also false, as we have clarified that there exists another perceivable aspect for the soul beyond the senses, and it rejoices in that perception with great joy. This does not indicate that it is the essence of the promised happiness. Rather, it is one of the pleasures that contribute to that happiness. Their assertion that happiness lies in the comprehension of these existences as they are is a false claim based on what we have previously established regarding the oneness of existence and the misconceptions that existence, for every perceiver, is confined to its perceptions. We have demonstrated the fallacy of that notion, as existence is broader than can be encompassed or fully perceived, whether spiritually or corporeally. What we derive from all that we have established regarding their doctrines is that the spiritual part, when it separates from corporeal powers, perceives a self-contained perception specific to a type of intelligibles, which are the existence encompassed by our knowledge, and it is not a general perception of all existence, as they are not confined. It experiences joy in that type of perception, akin to the joy of a child in its initial sensory perceptions. Who can then attain the perception of all existence, or achieve the happiness promised by the legislator if we do not act for it? How far-fetched is what you are promised? As for their claim that man is independent in refining and improving himself through engaging with the commendable traits of character and avoiding the reprehensible, it is based on the notion that the joy of the soul in its perception of itself is the essence of the promised happiness. This is because vices hinder the soul from fully perceiving that joy due to the corporeal qualities and their variations. We have clarified that the effects of happiness and misery lie beyond corporeal and spiritual perceptions. Thus, the refinement they have come to know benefits only the joy arising from spiritual perception, which is based on measures and laws. However, the happiness promised by the legislator for adhering to what he commanded in actions and morals is a matter that cannot be encompassed by the perceptions of the perceivers. Their leader, Abu Ali ibn Sina, recognized this when he stated in the Book of Principles and Resurrection that the spiritual resurrection and its states can be reached through rational proofs and measures because it is based on a preserved natural proportion and a consistent pattern, thus allowing for ample proofs. However, the corporeal resurrection and its states cannot be comprehended through proof because they do not adhere to a single proportion, and the true Mohammedan law has elaborated on it, so let us consider it and refer to it for its states. This knowledge, as you have seen, does not fulfill their intended goals, which they have circled around, along with its contradictions to the laws and their apparent meanings. It has, to our knowledge, only one fruit: sharpening the intellect in arranging evidence and arguments to attain the quality and accuracy in proofs. The organization of measures and their arrangement in terms of judgments and precision is as they have stipulated in their logical craft. They often employ this in their natural sciences and teachings, and beyond that, the observer in it, through the frequent use of proofs with their conditions, attains the quality of precision and accuracy in arguments and reasoning. For although they do not fulfill their intended purpose, they are the most accurate of what we know regarding the laws of contemplation. This is the fruit of this craft, along with an understanding of the doctrines of the scholars and their opinions and their harms, as you have learned. Let the observer in it be cautious and diligent in avoiding its pitfalls, and let the perspective of those who observe it be after being filled with religious knowledge and understanding of interpretation and jurisprudence. Let no one engage with it while being devoid of the knowledge of the faith, for few will escape its pitfalls. And God is the guide to the truth and the right path, and we would not have been guided had God not guided us. Chapter 32. On the invalidation of the art of astrology, its weak understanding, and the corruption of its purpose. This art claims that its practitioners can know the beings in the world of elements before they occur by understanding the powers of the planets and their effects on elemental beings, both individually and collectively. Thus, the positions of the heavens and the planets indicate what will happen of the types of universal and personal beings. The ancients among them believe that knowledge of the powers of the planets and their effects comes from experience, which is a matter that shortens lifespans, as gathering it requires many lifetimes. For experience is only gained through repeated trials to yield knowledge or conjecture. The cycles of the planets are long, requiring extended periods and ages that exceed the long lifespans of the world. Some of the weaker ones among them may have claimed that knowledge of the powers of the planets and their effects was revealed through prophecy, a view that has been sufficiently refuted. One of the clearest pieces of evidence against this is that the prophets, peace be upon them, are the farthest from such arts, and do not engage in foretelling the unseen except when it is from God. How could they claim to derive it through art and suggest it to their followers among creation? As for Ptolemy and his followers among the later ones, they believe that the indication of the planets in this regard is a natural indication due to the temperament that the planets acquire in elemental beings. They argue that the actions of the two luminaries and their effects on elemental beings are evident, such as the effect of the sun in changing the seasons and their temperaments, the ripening of fruits and crops and so forth, and the effect of the moon on moisture and water, the ripening of decaying materials, and the fruits of the vine, among other actions. Then he said, "We have two paths regarding the planets that follow. The first is to imitate those who have transmitted this from the masters of the art, although this is not convincing to the soul. The second is intuition and experimentation, by comparing each of them to the greater luminary, whose nature and effect we know clearly. We observe whether that planet increases in strength and temperament at the conjunction, thus recognizing its compatibility with it in nature, or decreases, thus recognizing its opposition. Then, if we know their powers individually, we can know them collectively when they are compared in the forms of trine, square, and others. And this knowledge is also derived from the natures of the zodiacal signs in relation to the greater luminary. If we know the powers of all the planets, they are influential in the air, which is evident. The temperament that arises from them for the air also affects what is beneath it from the generated beings, and it shapes the embryos and seeds, becoming a state for the body formed from them and for the soul connected to it, which receives from it, and what follows the soul and body from states, as the qualities of the seed and embryo are qualities of what is generated from them. He said, and this is, despite that, conjectural and not certain at all, nor is it from divine decree, meaning fate. It is merely part of the natural causes of existence, while divine decree precedes everything. This summarizes the words of Ptolemy and his companions, and it is stated in his book, The Four, and others. From this, the weakness of the understanding of this art becomes clear, as knowledge of the existent or conjecture about it is only obtained through knowledge of its total causes: the agent, the recipient, the form, and the purpose, as will be clarified in its place. The stellar powers, as they have established, are merely agents, while the elemental part is the recipient. Moreover, the stellar powers are not the sole agents. There are other active powers alongside them in the material part, such as the generative power of the father and the species present in the embryo, and the specific powers that distinguish a type from another, and so forth. Thus, if the stellar powers reach their completeness and knowledge is obtained about them, they are merely one agent among the total causes of existence. Then, it is required that alongside knowledge of the powers of the stars and their effects, there is additional intuition and conjecture, and at that point, one may have a conjecture about the occurrence of the being. Intuition and conjecture are powers of the observer in thought, and are not causes of existence, nor foundational to the art. If this intuition and conjecture are lost, it returns from conjecture to doubt. This is, if knowledge of the stellar powers is obtained correctly and is not hindered by any affliction, and this is lacking due to the need for knowledge of the calculations of the planets in their movements to understand their positions, and because the specialization of each planet with a power has no evidence. Ptolemy's understanding in establishing the powers of the 5 planets by comparing them to the sun is a weak understanding, because the power of the sun predominates over all the powers of the planets and dominates them. So it is rare to notice an increase or decrease in it during comparison, as he said. All of this undermines the definition of the beings occurring in the world of elements through this art. Moreover, the influence of the planets on what is beneath them is invalid, as it has been established in the chapter on monotheism, that there is no agent except God, through a demonstrative argument, as you have seen, and the scholars of theology have supported this with what is sufficient in explanation, that attributing causes to effects is of unknown quality, and the intellect, as it appears at first glance, judges the influence. So perhaps their attribution is not in the form of the known influence. The divine power is the link between them, as it links all beings above and below, especially since the law attributes all events to the power of God Almighty and disassociates from anything else. Prophecies also deny the significance of the stars and their effects. The examination of legal texts supports this, as in the saying that the sun and the moon do not eclipse due to the death of anyone or their life, and in the saying that, this morning, some of my servants are believers in me, and some are disbelievers in me. As for the one who says, we have been rained upon by the grace and mercy of God, he is a believer in me, and a disbeliever in the stars. And as for the one who says, we have been rained upon by such and such a star, he is a disbeliever in me, and a believer in the stars, according to the authentic hadith. Thus, the invalidity of this art has become clear through the law, and its weak understanding is evident through reason, along with its harms in human civilization due to the corrupt beliefs it instills in the common people, especially when the truth of its judgments coincidentally aligns with reality, which does not return to reasoning or verification, leading those without knowledge to speak of it and assume the truth of its judgments in all cases, which is not the case. This leads to attributing things to their non-creator. Moreover, what arises from it often in states is the expectation of severances, and what that expectation incites from the audacity of enemies and those lurking against the state to commit violence and rebellion. We have witnessed much of this, so this art should be prohibited for all people of civilization, due to the harms it brings to religion and states, and it does not diminish the fact that its existence is natural for humans according to their understandings and sciences. Good and evil are two natures present in the world that cannot be removed. Rather, the obligation is to strive for acquiring good through its causes and repelling the causes of evil and harm. This is the duty of one who knows the evils of this knowledge and its harms. And let it be known that even if it were correct in itself, no one among the faithful can acquire its knowledge or mastery. Rather, if someone looks into it and assumes mastery over it, he is in the utmost deficiency in reality. For the law has prohibited looking into it, so the gathering of people of civilization to read it and to teach it has ceased. And those who are fond of it among the people, who are the fewest and fewer than the fewest, only read its books and articles in secret, hidden from the people and under the yoke of the public, with the complexity of the art and the multitude of its branches and its difficulty in understanding. How can one gain anything substantial from it? We find that jurisprudence, which has widespread benefit in religion and the world, has easy access from the book and the sunnah, and the public is devoted to reading and teaching it. Then, after verification, compilation, prolonged study, and numerous sessions, one becomes proficient in it, one after another, across eras and generations. How can one learn something that is abandoned by the law, prohibited, hidden from the public, difficult to access, and requires, after practice and acquisition of its principles and branches, additional intuition and conjecture that envelops the observer? So where is the acquisition and proficiency in it with all of this? The claim of this by some people is rejected, and there is no evidence to support it due to the strangeness of the art among the faithful and the scarcity of its bearers. Consider this, and you will see the validity of what we have asserted. And God knows the unseen. No one can unveil his unseen. Among what occurred in this regard from some of our contemporaries when the Arabs overwhelmed the armies of Sultan Abu al-Hassan and besieged him in Kairouan, and the rumors of both sides, allies and enemies, increased, Abu al-Qasim al-Ruhani, one of the poets of Tunisia, said, "I seek forgiveness from God at all times. Life and joy have gone. Morning in Tunisia, and evening, and the morning is for God, while the evening is fear and hunger, and death is brought about by chaos and plague, and people are in doubt and war, and what can argument benefit?" So Ahmad sees Ali, who has met destruction and turmoil. Another said, "A gentle breeze will come to you, and God above this will decree what he wills. O observer of the stars, what has this sky done? You have delayed us, and you claimed that you are today our allies." A Thursday has passed over a Thursday, and a Saturday and a Wednesday have come, and half a month and 10 days have passed, and the decree has encompassed it, and we see nothing but falsehood. Is this ignorance or disdain? We have known that there is no way to avert the decree. I am content with God as my deity. Your moon or your intellect, what are these stars but servants or maidens, decreed upon them, and they do not decree, and they have no claim in the world. Minds have strayed, seeing what the crime and annihilation are, and nature has ruled in existence, which is brought about by water and air. You have not seen sweetness in the face of bitterness. They nourish them with soil and water. God is my Lord, and I do not know what the individual atom is, nor the void, nor the primal matter that calls out, "What is my form without a body?" There is no existence, no non-existence, no permanence, no negation, and I have not known in acquisition except what trade and purchase bring. My doctrine and my religion are what the people have as allies, for there are no chapters, no roots, no debate, and no hypocrisy. What follows the heart, and we have followed. How good it would be to follow them as they know, and that nonsense was not there. O Ash'ari of the time, I feel the summer and winter. I have not passed through evil except evil, and good is rewarded by its like. If I am obedient, I do not disobey, and I have hope, and I am under the command of a Lord obeyed by the throne and the earth. There is no victory by you, but the decree and fate have allowed it. If the Ash'ari were to speak of someone to whom he belongs in opinion, he would say, "Tell them that I am innocent of what they say." Chapter 33. On the denial of the fruit of alchemy and the impossibility of its existence and the evils arising from its impersonation. Know that many of those unable to earn their livelihood are driven by greed to impersonate these crafts, believing that they are one of the means of sustenance and that acquiring wealth from them is easier and simpler for the seeker. They engage in numerous hardships, difficulties and sufferings, facing the oppression of rulers and losing money in expenses, in addition to undermining their purpose and ultimately facing ruin when they find themselves disappointed, all while thinking they are doing well. Their greed is fueled by the observation that metals can transform and that some can turn into others due to a common material. They attempt through treatment to turn silver into gold and copper and tin into silver, believing that this is possible in the natural world. They have various methods for this treatment, differing in their approaches and the materials they use, which they refer to as the precious stone, whether it be dung, blood, hair, eggs, or other substances. In summary, their method, after determining the material, is to grind it on a hard, smooth stone and to moisten it during grinding with water, after adding to it the herbs and medicines that suit its intended transformation into the desired metal. Then it is dried in the sun after watering or cooked over fire or subjected to calcination to extract its water or earth. If all this treatment is satisfactory and the process is conducted according to the principles of their craft, it results in a powder or liquid they call the elixir. They claim that if this elixir is poured onto heated silver, it will turn back into gold, or if poured onto heated copper, it will revert to silver, as intended in their work. The more knowledgeable among them assert that this elixir is a compound of the 4 elements, achieved through this specific treatment and preparation, possessing natural powers that direct what it contains towards its intended form and essence, instilling in it the qualities and powers it has acquired, similar to how yeast transforms dough into its essence, making it suitable for digestion and quickly converting it into nourishment. Likewise, the elixir of gold and silver transforms the metals into their respective forms. This is the gist of their claims, and you will find them engrossed in this treatment, seeking sustenance and livelihood from it, passing down its rules and principles from the writings of the masters of the craft before them, debating its riddles and uncovering its secrets, as it is often akin to a puzzle. I once discussed this with our teacher, Abu al-Barakat al-Talifi, a prominent figure in the Andalusian scholarly community, and presented to him some of the writings on the subject. He examined it for a long time, then returned it to me, saying, "While I guarantee that he will not return home except in disappointment." Some of them limit themselves to mere deception, whether overt, like coating silver with gold or copper with silver, or mixing them in proportions of 1 part, 2 parts, or 3, or covertly, like disguising the similarities between metals through craft, such as whitening copper and coating it with refined gold, resulting in a metallic body resembling silver, which is only discernible to skilled critics. The practitioners of this deception consider it a means to circulate their counterfeit among the people, stamping it with the seal of the ruler to mislead the public into believing it is genuine. These are the lowest of people in their trade and the worst in their